Hello and welcome to Virtual Coffee's Lightning Talks. It is 11 a.m. and we are getting started on time with no warning. Excellent. I am very glad to be here today with you. My name is Becca and I am the creator and one of the maintainers of Virtual Coffee. Virtual Coffee is an intimate group of developers at all stages of their coding journey. And we're here as a community of developers to partake in this journey where we form community, we allow room for growth and mentorship at all levels, and to provide a safe space for everyone interested in tech to create meaningful opportunities for learning, leadership, and contribution for everyone, like these lightning talks today. And so we are very, very excited to present to you all of these talks over the next 2 hours, where our members will be sharing a lot of great information with you. And because these are lightning talks, there will be no questions, but feel free to put those in the chat and we'll make sure to connect you with our speakers. And they'll also be available in the future for replay on our YouTube channel. So in case you missed something, you wanted to go back and remember what they had to say, this is a great opportunity to be able to connect with them. And so we're really glad to have you all here with us today. I especially want to thank our speakers and everyone who has helped support the Lightning Talks over the last couple of weeks or months since we started putting these together. And I'm going to get started now by introducing our very first speaker, who is Gant Laborde. And Gant is a member of Virtual Coffee. He's an owner of Infinite Red, a mentor, an adjunct professor, a published author, and award-winning speaker. For 20 years, he's been involved in software development and continues strong today. He's recognized as a Google developer expert in web and machine learning, but informally, he is an open sorcerer. And I can attest to that because I've met Gant in person and I for sure have seen that. But he aspires one day to become a mad scientist. He blogs, videos, and maintains popular repositories in the communities. We are very happy to have Gant here today talking to us about Fearless and Fabulous, conquering your stage one laugh at a time. Thanks for being here today, Gant.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Well, we're going to get started, I guess, a couple of minutes early, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you to kick us off with this amazing talk.
Thank you so much, Becca. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and joining us today. I will not be using slides. I just want to take a short lightning talk of your attention to talk about this whole idea of public speaking and what it really means to me and what I think it means to all of us. And I think this is a great way to start this whole thing off. So, one thing I do like to do every time I talk virtually, it's very alone and kind of like I miss everybody. I miss my audience and I want to connect with you. So, please, please, please blow up the comments. Speakers love this. So, for the rest of the day, for all of the next 2 hours, please blow up the comments for everybody. Make sure that they're getting some kind of communication because, we all went through a pandemic, right? We know what that feels like. We know what speaking into the void feels like. And without those comments, I'm just a dude in his office talking at a lit Black Mirror screen. Okay. So give me that kind of feedback. All right. So let's start this off. So, a couple of tips for public speaking, some very important things. Number one, no notes. No notes. Don't do it. It puts a barrier between you and them. So, next is one second. Oh, welcome everybody. I hope that you're ready for today's talk. But you don't need it. You're smart. You don't need this kind of information. You look fabulous, by the way. Have you lost weight? All of you? Tip number 2 in public speaking, compliment your audience. Everybody likes a good compliment, except for Kirk for some reason. Don't know why. I'm sure I'll see his comment soon. Third tip for public speaking, get to know your audience, okay? Really get to know them. It's virtual. That's why I went ahead and I cyber stalked most of you before this. It's good to see some of you again, especially you, Ryan. Hope that rash cleared up. I think that's a fun way to start things off. And I think it's really fun to talk specifically about tips for public speaking. And we usually give these fun tips, like where to look in a room, or where to sort of like source your material, or whether or not to use slides. And so, starting off this virtual coffee, I was thinking, okay, let's get that started. But just yesterday, I got another message from somebody on Reddit that said, I have a public presentation and I am losing it today. They're so worried. They don't know, they're losing sleep, they're having difficulty. And so I thought to myself, to kick this off, one thing I really want to kind of get to is, what are the tricks to get from fearless to funny, to get from shy to fly with your presentation? Because we need to talk for a minute here about what the cost of fear is. When you're afraid to speak for a presentation, yeah, it's difficult to get in that presentation, but fears manifest themselves in all kinds of ways. For instance, you could have a fear of flying, stops you from going to conferences, connecting and interacting with people. You could have a fear of doing that presentation for your company, where you're just not going to be in the eye of the company. You're not going to actually research the information. You're not going to go into the career you wanted to have. You could be afraid of going and meeting people. You could be afraid of applying to that CFP. Kudos to everybody today for doing their lightning talk and actually interacting and getting this part of their life set from 0 to 1. But there's a lot of people out there that are frozen at 0. They don't have that first part. And I used to be one of those people. I know that's weird for me to say. I'm like, hey, I want to talk to you. I talk all the time. I have a website where I have all my talks listed for years. I emceed conferences through whole days for thousands of people. So how is this dude just like one of those scared nerds who wouldn't even talk in front of a group of people? Well, the truth of the matter is, you just, that fear starts to take over. And when you know, you say the sentence, I want to do this, and I know it's good for me, but everything after that but is a rationalization. Okay. And like I said, I knew this. I went to college, believe it or not, and I actually got out of it too. It worked great. But what happened is I went to a psychology 101 class, and I stood in front of 15 students. I said my first sentence and then like shut down like a computer and could not say another sentence. It worried me to death. I had like 5 coffees ahead of time. I'm like, I'm going to be great. And then turns out I got in front of everybody and I couldn't say more than one sentence. So, what takes somebody from here to there? I'm going to give you some tips about that. One, coffee was a bad idea. Okay. Do not take anything that's going to heighten your blood pressure right beforehand. Maybe a glass of wine, but don't quote me on that. But one of the things I did is I got in my own head rather than changing my perspective and thinking about it as a gift that I'm giving to other people. And that's a key part of it, because when you're in your own head, you can't see. Like, there was nothing in front of me. I couldn't tell you a person's face. All I could think of is everything I was doing and everything that could be wrong. And I wanted to go for perfection. Perfection is the enemy of fear because nothing's perfect. So fear will always hold you if you think that you need to be perfect. You can make all the mistakes you need to, and people on the other side of that wall of fear are hoping that you're going to interact, and they're hoping that you're going to break through. And they're hoping that you're going to say the speech, take the flight, put in the CFP, or do the presentation. Everybody I talk to is 100% in their own head. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips to help you out if you're stuck in your own head. Okay. Number one, the 10x rule. The 10x rule means that anything that you feel, whether your voice quavers or quivers or whatever the word is, your hands shake or you have some kind of fear in some other way, you think that everybody sees that. No one sees that. As a matter of fact, the one thing I've learned in being a public speaker for this long is if I want to do something, I have to do it 10x for you to. Thank you, Siri. I have to do it 10x for you to hear it, and apparently 2x for Siri. But one of the things that's really important here is that I have to really go overboard in order to make sure people are seeing what I want them to see. That means that little bit that you think everybody saw, they didn't see it at all. Speakers know you have to 10x what you want your audience to see. And that is a shield of protection. They don't see it. They don't worry about it. It's totally okay. So the 10x rule, first things first, get out of your head. Everything that's magnified for you is nothing for them. The second thing that I'm going to say here is that this is the biggest shift. Remember, I talked about the framing shift? There's a huge difference. When you're about to have anxiety, your body releases cortisol, your blood vessels constrict, you start to have a fight or flight response. Your pupils dilate, and fight or flight is not the right place to give a presentation. Don't worry about it. You should not be a genius in fight or flight. But there is a chemical that you can release, and it's oxytocin. Oxytocin is geared specifically towards being able to be excited. So if you imagine that person who's sitting in front of the roller coaster and they hate life, they do not want to get on that roller coaster. Some of you right now, I can tell, are like, oh my God, I hate roller coasters. When you're sitting in front of that roller coaster and you hate it, your body's releasing all the chemicals for fight or flight, and you are resisting that. But the person right next to you who's excited to get on that roller coaster is releasing oxytocin. And they're getting that same adrenaline, they're getting that same cortisol. But one of the things they're doing is that oxytocin comes in and dilates their blood vessels and allows them to be more present, allows them to see what's going on. And that's a great thing. So, one is the context shift. Anchor your brain specifically on excitement. Go to an exciting thought, go to an oxytocin releasing thought. You know what? Try to connect to your audience, hug them. If you were here right now, I'd be giving out hugs left and right. It's so much fun. It's a great way to really connect with your audience. If you go to one of my talks and you don't want to get hugged, sit in the back row. So what I'll say is, like, the oxytocin that's released in these moments is the antidote to the poison that your body is filling with to make you fight or flight. Oxytocin is excited. So the change in that framework. So how do you know? And one of the things I said here is laughing your way to your stage, is because if you can laugh, then you know that you're beating that fear. When people are strict with fear, they can't get a laugh out. They can't think about something and think it's funny. So that's your barometer for what's going on inside your head. That's your chemical barometer. And if you can't laugh, then you need to re anchor yourself on your oxytocin thoughts and your excited feel. This is the body biohack to all of a sudden getting around that idea that you shouldn't go ask for a promotion, that you shouldn't go to a meeting, that you shouldn't go to a conference, that you shouldn't apply to talk, that you shouldn't get on that stage. You need to realize that you're excited, and all those people in the audience are excited for you. That is the awesome hack. Now, that's just level one. After you do that, there's a whole world of having better talks, having different strategies, everything like that. But 0 to 1, the most important part is go out there and put yourself in that situation and practice anchoring yourself in that laughable, happy stage so that you can be ready to present for everybody. Okay? Hopefully, I motivated some of you to go ahead and give this a try. I can tell you this, I will talk to you forever. Find me on Twitter. Let's talk about this. Message me. Let's talk about React Native. Let's talk about AI. And hey, let's talk about public speaking. I love talking about these things. Find me on Twitter. Message me, DM me. Tell me what conferences you've been wanting to go to. Tell me what's been going on. I will chat your ear off about these things. So with that, I think that you've got step 0 to 1. And a lot of you are working on step 1 to infinity, which is the rest of your talks. But I'm going to leave you with my final 2 tips for public speaking. Second to last tip, always leave your audience wanting more. And with that, back to you, Becca.
Thanks so much, Gant. It's great to have you here with us. I dropped Gant's Twitter information there, and I just want to say that I met Gant in person at the end of last year, and I was not feeling super great about my speaker experience. I was kind of at a low point with what I was doing, and I just remember Gant was like, you need to take up space. Like, don't shrink yourself." And it was something that I had progressively been doing. And when I went into my first talk of the new year in January, I thought, like, you know what? I need to take up space in this moment. And so I can 100% say that Gant's advice
Oh,
blew all of my previous presentations out of the water. So listen to what
that's
Gant
awesome.
says. It has so much power in what you're doing. And I appreciate you sharing all that with us here today, Gant.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I love this kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to listening to all the other talks and enjoying the rest of the day.
Great. We are very excited to hear the rest of the talks too. And to build on everything you said, this was a great way to start off our talks today at Virtual Coffee. And we are excited to be moving on to our next talk as well, which is Look for the Holes, Surviving Survivor Bias. I every single time I type that, I typed it wrong. I can't say it or type it, but it is with Dan Ott, and I can say and type his name, who is an independent front end designer and developer and person who does things in tech, a father, ADHD person, and Clevelander. He is, I copied your bio twice. So, welcome, Dan, to talk to us about these things. We are very excited to hear what you have to say today. And also, big shout out because Dan is running all of the things behind the scenes as well as making sure that he can speak number 2 today and being super flexible. So, thanks, Dan, for that. We cannot hear you. He is super technical with all of the things. He's very good at audio too. We also co-host a podcast together. So if you have not checked it out, we are the Virtual Coffee Podcast, and you can find it on our site at virtualcoffee.io/podcast. Oh, I heard a little sound there. So that would be great. Dan, if you keep not being able to talk, I'm going to have to tell jokes. And I know how much you love that and everybody else does, but maybe we can learn about looking for the holes a little bit sooner. Yeah, we can't. Okay, where's my joke book? All right. Seth Hall has a joke website about dad jokes. I'm going to try and find the dad jokes, and then you all get
All
to hear
right.
me tell dad jokes. Oh,
Can you hear me now?
no.
Yeah, I know. I
I
needed to
was
get.
so
I
close
needed
to
to get ahead
telling a
of that.
good dad joke.
I really needed to stop that before it got too far. Yeah, my fancy microphone is not working for whatever reason, so I'm just talking on my MacBook. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I apologize. Of course, I'm the one that has the audio issues, so that makes sense. I feel like that is that lines up.
But you stopped them before I could tell my jokes.
I know I had to do
How
that.
dare
That was
you?
an emergency. I know. I was feeling fine just trying to fix it, but then you started talking about telling jokes, and I was like,
And you
that's when I
panicked
really,
and you were
yeah,
like,
that's when I
I
really started
better
freaking out.
resort
Yep.
to my MacBook microphone. Okay, fine. All right. Well, here you go. Go ahead and let us know about survival.
All right. Yes, thank you, Becca. Sorry, everybody, for the problems there, but so be it, I guess. Yeah, so I enjoy making titles of things that are hard to say. Surviving survival bias. So yeah, hi, I'm Dan. I am a maintainer here at Virtual Coffee, co-host with Becca the podcast. Like she said, I do other things and live in Cleveland, all that stuff. What else am I? Oh, do we have a random check-in question here today? I guess not. So yeah, what is survival bias? All right, survival bias is, so you'll also see this coined as survivorship bias. It's the logical error of concentrating on entities that passed the selection process while overlooking those that did not. That's a little bit of a dense definition. So what is that exactly? All right. So if you Google survivor bias, you're going to see this example everywhere. And it's because it's perfect. It's because, well, A of all, he coined the term here, and two of all, it's really a very good example of survivor bias. So this is a sort of a diagram, I guess, of a World War II bomber. And World War II bombers, pilots, bomber crews were having a rough time in the survivorship. So 51% of aircraft were killed on operations. That means they were shot down. 12% were killed or wounded in accidents. 13% became prisoners of war. So that also means they were shot down, right? So only 24% survived the war unscathed, which is not great. And enter Abraham Wald. He was a member of the statistical research group at Columbia University. And the Army came to him, or the Navy, I suppose it was, came to him, came to this group, and were like, how can we improve these rates? So they had, they figured out they were able to add a little bit of armor to the airplane. They couldn't reinforce the whole plane because it would be too heavy, right? And so they had all these planes coming back. And so what these guys did was made a study all of the planes that came back and made a diagram, basically of where there were bullet holes, right? And so they looked at all the bullet holes in the plane and said, okay, so these are where our planes are getting shot, right? And the leaders were like, great, let's put armor, let's put armor right here. Probably not over there, but this is obviously where the planes are getting shot. But the problem is, right, we are missing some data. What's missing from our data? The only data that we had were planes that made it back home. And so I think you can see where I'm going here. What's missing are the planes that didn't come home, right? And so he advised putting armor here, putting armor all the places where you don't see bullet holes, because the planes that got shot here, the planes that got shot here, did not make it home, right? So that's where the name survivor bias comes from, because you're only looking at the survivors. I'm going to look at a bunch of other examples here. Some of them, not all of them have to do with actually literally surviving a thing. But that's where the name comes from. And it's a very powerful, I feel like this metaphor is a very powerful one. And I love this diagram. So if you Google survivor bias, you will see this picture specifically just everywhere. And so let's find some more examples. Here we go with cats. Okay, so in a 1987 study from the Journal of American Veterinary Medical Association, 2 vets examined 132 cases of cats that had fallen out of high-rise windows. So, I don't want to make light of things, but they did find that cats who fall from less than 6 stories have greater injuries than cats who fall from higher than 6 stories. So that is wild. And they couldn't figure out why. They did. I think the scientists didn't really make any super big guesses, but then people were talking about it for a while. And this is a real theory that people had. One theory is that cats reach terminal velocity at about 5 stories. And at this point, they relax, allowing a more distributed force of impact and less severe injuries. And I found this when I was doing research for this talk and was just laughing, because the idea that like the cats are like, well, now I've hit terminal velocity, so I'm good to go. Let's just relax. Didn't make any sense to me, but apparently that was the leading theory for a while. What's missing from our data here, right? So we have a data set of 132 cats that accidentally fell. The vets examined 132 cats that fell, but also were brought to the animal medical center. And so, again, obviously, I think you can see where we're going here. It did not examine all of the cats that sort of fell from higher and did not make it. And that's like a big source of problem, a big source of missing data, right? And so the missing data led to some erroneous assumptions, and by only looking at a portion of the data, right? And so again, we are looking at where are the holes in the data, and so there's a bunch of other examples of survivorship bias. You can do them. I found this on thedecisionlab.com, and it made me laugh every time I look at it. But survivorship bias. So this is another place that this shows up in sort of modern times in our world, is looking at success stories, right? So you have startups, or you have bank funds, or lots of other things, companies, students, all sorts of things, right? You hear the stories of people that made it miraculously, and you say, okay, well, we just need to do what they do, right? But I think we can say that's not really all the way true. So here's another example: famous and successful college dropout. So I'm sure you've heard some of these, right? Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, also this guy, 4 incredibly famous and incredibly successful dropouts from college, right? And so you might look at this data and say, well, man, if I'm in college, but I want to be successful and famous, like Dan and Steve, I need to drop out of college. But right, what's missing from our data here? Okay, so in the US, 19.4 million students attended college. I didn't go to look back at the statistics were when I dropped out, which was about 2004, but I'm sure it was similar. United States experiences 40% college dropout rate every year, right? And so that is 7.76 million students dropouts that were not amazing and successful like me and Bill. So this is like another case of you need to figure out, if you're looking at some data to make a decision, you need to figure out what pieces of data might I be missing. There's another survival bias is found often in the medical community. There's a bunch of examples I found of different diagnoses and studies and things like that. But one that is pertinent to me, right, is ADHD diagnoses. And I am sure that you have seen, if you haven't thought it yourself, you've seen other people saying, something like, I can't believe there's so many people being diagnosed with ADHD. In my day, we just went to school and I don't know, did our homework or something. I don't know. And it's true, right? 42% increase in ADHD diagnosis over the past 8 years. It's diagnoses from adults has been growing, and this last statistic, I meant to throw this on the second slide, but from 2001 to 2010, the rate of ADHD among non-Hispanic Black girls increased by over 90%, which is crazy. And so, one conclusion you could try to draw from this is, oh man, now all these students or all these people are just deciding they have ADHD or something, or doctors are going crazy. But the truth of the matter is there's the research around ADHD has improved. The diagnostic principles have improved, and all of these people had ADHD before and just weren't diagnosed. And so that is kind of one of those cases, right? There's a very similar thing here, and this is how I hope that the graph for ADHD looks. So this is the history of left-handedness, and you can see here what is 4 or 5% in the Victorian ages, right? It even dropped more, and then all of a sudden it skyrocketed. And what happened here was society stopped vilifying left-handed people, right? Society stopped trying to, in general, most of the time anyway, force left-handed people to be right-handed. And you can see here that conclusion actually plays out because around 1960 or something, it kind of tops out. And this is where it's been since then, right? So 12% of people are left-handed. All the research shows left-handedness is genetic, and you can force somebody to be right-handed, or probably to be left-handed too. But if you leave everything alone, about 12% of people will be left-handed, and that's how it should be, right? So all this was missing data, right? All these people here were left-handed. Oop, I just did something. Oh, okay, I skipped this slide. Here we go. All these people here were left-handed still. They did not exist. They just were either not reported to be left-handed or, forced to be right-handed by society or their parents or teachers or whatever. Okay, so here's our slide. Survival bias in tech, right? Because a lot of us are in tech, including myself. Okay, so this is a great story. This is a great story. So 2010, a YouTube engineer, Chris Zacharias, began Project Feather, right? And so he was an engineer at YouTube. And this was back when Flash was still a thing, right? So the YouTube videos were still loading in Flash. And the goal was he decided to reduce the page weight for a YouTube video. So it was around 1.2 megabytes to under 100 kilobytes. And, why does page weight matter? This is before Google was going crazy about, reducing your search results if you were slow, but still slow websites are sort of bad, right? For a lot of reasons. And so he did this project and it worked. He kicked out Flash and started using the HTML5 video player, reduced all of the requests to from I don't know how many to like 4 requests, and made it to like 98 kilobytes, something like that. And the result was longer page load times in their analytics, right? So they have all this data of how long does it take for a page to load? How long does it take for a browser to like show the video? How long does it, do all this stuff? And they have analytics that measure all this stuff. And they ended up with longer page load times after they reduced this by however much percentage that is. And I imagine that he was just sitting there being like, no. All right, so what's missing from our data? All right, so here's what this is from his blog post. There was a disproportionate increase in traffic from places like Southeast Asia, South America, Africa, and even remote regions of Siberia. So they reduced the page weight, and the traffic from these areas increased a bunch. And further investigation revealed that in these places, the average page load time under Feather, this is after the, so this is when the page load is, or page weight is like 98 kilobytes, over 2 minutes. That meant before they did this work, it was taking more than 20 minutes to load. And so these people were never even being measured, right? So the people in areas with very bad internet connections were just literally not being measured by their analytics. And so, right, that's what I said. So thanks, slide. I just said that. Anyway, and so they have these analytics, all of this data, but huge gaps missing. And it can be not just slow connections, right? So, all right, so it's slow connections, right? Here's some other factors that can, lead to this thing, right? Users on, this really slow little typewriter thing. Users on different devices, right? So, back before iPhones, mobile was like really big, and everybody just assumed that mobile should be a thing. People were making decisions, especially like newspapers were making decisions about, should we spend time making our website look good in a mobile device? And they would look at, I found anecdotal evidence for this. I didn't find any specific, so I don't have a specific example, but look at their analytics and say, we don't have users on mobile, so why would we spend the time optimizing our site for mobile, right? That's cool. Users employing ad tracking blockers. Right. So if you're relying on Google Analytics for your analytics data, you are missing all of the people that use this. So if your user, if like you use Firefox, right? Firefox blocks third-party cookies by default. And so a lot of these people aren't getting tracked at all. And ad blockers, all that stuff, right? And oh man, I should have been just on enter, you guys. And users with disabilities, right? And so this is another big thing, right? So if you look at your data and you say, well, we don't have hardly any users that are using screen readers, right? Or whatever, or screen magnifiers or things like that. It's possible / likely that that's because your site just doesn't work and they're not coming to your site, right? And so you can think about that YouTube example and think about why, when you're looking at your data sets, and it doesn't just have to be Google Analytics, but if you're looking at a chunk of data, you need to look at the whole picture, find the whole picture, figure out what pieces of the picture you're missing. And so how can we survive survival bias? All right, so collect data from a diverse range of sources, right? So one way to, and you can read about that Project Feather and some other things, but other ways to get around the analytics thing, right, is that you can look at your server logs and see, because those get hit, right? So if a user, I'm not going to get like too technical, but if a user hits your website and then like leaves right away, it won't show up in Google Analytics. It will show up on server logs. And so you can collect data from, you can diversify your sources by using, for example, analytics and server logs. You want to include both successful and unsuccessful cases in your analysis. And so I don't know if this really, I suppose that people leaving your site before they come, or just not coming at all, can add to that. Be aware of your own biases and assumptions. This is a big one, and this doesn't obviously a lot of this is good advice for avoiding lots of different kinds of biases, but it's a good one for this one too. And ask questions that challenge assumptions, right? And so if somebody comes to you and says, well, we have this data, we need to do this, we need to avoid like not make our site accessible because we don't have non-sighted users coming to our site. Like that's an assumption, and I think it's important to challenge it. and then seek out alternative viewpoints. And that's kind of saying the same thing, I guess. And oh, there's another thing. Pay attention to what is not being said or being considered, right? And so that is look for the holes. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. So I'm all done with that talk, and I'm really good at ending things as usual. So Becca, why don't you come in and save me? Because I'm just going to keep rambling until somebody cuts me off, as usual.
Thanks, Dan, my podcast co-host, who is very good at
Save me.
co-hosting things. This was really great. There's a lot of cool things that we learned throughout this and a lot of great slides. So I hope everybody was able to catch that, and you'll be able to rewatch it on the replay too. So thanks for sharing all of the information with us.
Yes.
If you loved listening to Dan, please listen to our podcast, because it is a lot
I'm there.
of, yes, he is there.
So is Becca. So it's good.
What didn't we learn in this talk? Exactly. Real RLG in the chat. I'm sorry, I'm not sure who you are. Lots of great comments in the chat. Thanks everyone for being here and listening.
Thanks everybody.
And
Thanks, Becca.
we've got another great talk coming up with Matt McGinnis, who's going to be talking to us about ChatGPT for developers. And Matt is a full stack developer with Rails and React at Typist, based in Toronto, Canada. He's a former artificial intelligence lead at IBM and Microsoft, mathematics professor at Centennial College, and I can't say it. Saskatchewan Polytechnic. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm really congested today, and it makes it even worse. Nothing I pronounce is coming out in the right way. So feel free to correct me, Matt, as you share all of the cool stuff with ChatGPT for developers.
Thanks a lot, Becca. I would have updated my LinkedIn profile if I knew we'd be diving in there today. But hi, everyone. My name is Matt McInnes. I'm just going to get my screen sharing here right now. I want to share my entire screen. Thank you very much. There we go. Let's get started. Let's have some fun. So today I'm going to be talking about ChatGPT for developers. Everything I'm going to talk about in here applies to what are large language models, or LLMs. And ChatGPT is an example of a really great, maybe the best one in the world, of a large language model. But why am I giving this talk in the first place? Well, first, as Becca mentioned, I love this stuff. I love machine learning and AI. I've worked in the field for quite a while. It was 7 years ago. I jumped in as a data scientist at IBM now. And further to that, there's been some recent gigantic leaps in AI that you've probably heard of, ChatGPT being the latest. And it seems like every week we're going further down the field with what this can do for us. And I've been using these tools extensively. I'm going to focus on ChatGPT today, but I believe more people should be using these tools. They've really have made me much more productive with everything I do, and especially development and writing code. And anyone can do it. It's really easy. I want you to go and try it out. That's my goal for the talk, is that you get excited, you jump in, you try some things out, and let's do it. So today, I'm going to do some basics about prompting. I'm going to give you lots of examples. So examples like crazy. We're going to be throwing everything into ChatGPT. So it's all going to be live. I'm going to end with some of my biggest tips and examples of what you can do, and everything I'm going to show you is open sourced. I put it on my Twitter and my GitHub. So here's my Twitter handle just down at the bottom. I'll put it in the chat though after. And just one last tip, don't try to understand everything. I'm going to be showing you lots of Ruby code. It's highly readable, but really try to focus on the input and output of the models. And of course, use the replay, because I'm going to go really quick. Let's dive in. So prompting basics. Let's look at a few just really simple examples and build up our sort of levels of prompting here. So I'm going to start with a really basic example, which is how do I create a user, which is a class. So I want to create a new user instance from 2 hashes of attributes in Rails. And if you're not familiar with Ruby, a hash is the equivalent of an object in JavaScript or a dictionary in Python. But I've got 2 of them, and I want to instantiate this new class. So let's go ask ChatGPT to do this for us. So I'm using ChatGPT. It's free. I'm on the pro plan right now. But everything that I'm going to show you will work on the free plan just fine. So let's throw our prompt in. Great, we get a little explanation. So to create a new user instance from 2 hashes in Rails, you can merge 2 hashes, pass it into the thing. Below, we're getting a big explanation about how this stuff works. That's great. And this code will work out of the box. If I have a user class defined, this works perfectly. So that's pretty cool. Great starting point. Okay, let's try to take it a little bit further now. Okay, so I'm going to put in my context paragraph. This is a paragraph that I've been creating progressively over the last few months, and I often just copy paste and dump it into ChatGPT, which is what I'm going to do now. So I will show you this after my context paragraph. I've got a slide on it coming up next, but I'm going to do the same thing again. So let's do a new chat. I'm going to paste my context paragraph in, a big paragraph containing lots of information about me, about our code base, about apps or things that we use. We'll break it down in a moment. And I'm going to ask the same question. Go ahead and create a new user. Use these 2 hashes in Rails. Great. So you can create a new user from these 2 hashes by merging the hashes together like this. So you'll notice a few things. It's much shorter. The code example came faster. There's less of an explanation. Those are all things that I wanted and engineered with this prompt. That's great. And let's do one more. Let's follow up with a question here. We'll say, let's rewrite this example using Ruby 3. Okay, and I'm just going to copy paste that. We'll say rewrite this example using Ruby 3, and let's see what it gives us back. Sure, here's how you can rewrite the example using Ruby 3 with the numbered parameter feature. So just a different syntax here. So I really like this syntax where we're using a double splat operator to break out these hashes versus using these like long merge things here. I just really like that bottom syntax. I'll also note that this was introduced in Ruby 2 as my awesome developer on my team, Andre, pointed out. So this isn't specific to Ruby 3. But the example here still stands is you can go back and ask these models to go a little bit further. Rewrite this method using these tools or update it using these things. That's a really good method for prompting. So going back to our thing. So let's talk about that context paragraph I just gave it in order to get better output faster from ChatGPT. And that process, by the way, of trying to develop prompts that you can input as quickly as possible to get the most useful input back as possible is the challenge that's taken on by a field called prompt engineering. It's a really, really cool field. Highly recommend you dive in. I'm going to show you my favorite. I'm going to show you just one technique that's in prompt engineering that's sort of beginner intermediate technique in this talk. I just want to highlight that that's really what we're doing here is figuring out how to prompt it better. So this is my context paragraph. So I describe who I am, what I do, the company I work for, what the company does a little bit, where we're located. I say Typist is used in Ruby on Rails version 7. We have a Postgres database. We use Minitest for testing, and we use the shoulda gem. I say when writing tests, use the shoulda gem wherever possible. We use Devise for authentication. I say Matt is a highly proficient Ruby on Rails. At this point, I'm just bragging. No, I'm kidding. This is relevant in a moment. When answering questions, reply as Matt and give short, succinct answers with explanations unless otherwise asked. And in your response, do not repeat questions back. All the code you create should meet web accessibility standards. So this is my copy and paste blurb. If you're on a Mac, you can use that feature where if you just drag your mouse to the bottom right corner, you will get this little sort of pop-up for your notes. So you can just grab it and copy paste. There's also some good extensions that will put it in automatically for you. But just to describe why I'm giving it a prompt like this, so first I'm giving it context. So I'm saying, I'm Matt McInnes. I work for Typist. I'm in Toronto. I use Rails 7. So I give it context about who I am. This is really useful, for example, for writing emails or responding. Also, I'm going to show you an example later of how I use it to help me sort of generate a draft of a contract. And being location aware that I'm in Toronto, Canada, helps it use Canadian law when it's giving me that feedback and information. I tell it some information about my stack. That's also really useful when it's generating code. And I give it direction about voice. So I say, use Matt's voice. And I tell it Matt's a developer and he's a CEO. So that's helpful if I'm, for example, writing code or responding to emails. It also limits the explanations that come back by saying that I'm highly proficient in Rails. I say it to use its shoulda gem wherever possible in testing. I tell it to use accessibility. All of this gives like a direction to the output it's going to give me back. And then finally, this is a really important one, is control its verbosity, which is like how much it's giving you back when. So I say be short, be succinct, don't repeat question back, limit explanations. All those help with that. So that's my little tidbit on prompting basics. So develop your context paragraph. It's really cool. And then you can just sort of preface all the prompts you're going to put in. So here's some of the biggest boosts I've received as a developer from ChatGPT. I'm going to show you some live examples now as we go through. So let's do it. I'm going to start with, this is one from 2 nights ago. All these are real examples. They're actual code that we're using in our code base now. Diagnosing unhelpful error messages. So this is brutal. 2 nights ago, I'm writing code, or days ago, I'm writing code, and I'm writing a little class that you can see on the right-hand side of my screen. And it's a great little class called Family Initializer. I've stripped it down for the purposes here, but all the relevant code is still here. And I'm initializing, it accepts an object and a random name, and I just sort of initialize the class. And then it does a few things. So it adds a name, it just checks that the keys are still there. Cool. And then I go into the Rails console to kind of run my class, and I say, okay, family initializer.new, and I give it an empty family object, and I give it a random name, and then I get this error. And this is the worst kind of error because it's not helpful at all. It says error in the initialize method, wrong number of arguments, and I gave it 1 and I expected 0, and I'm massively confused because I actually gave it 2 arguments, I thought, and it should be expecting 2 arguments. And it's not an understatement to say that, 20 minutes later, I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm just hitting my head off the desk. I'm trying to put debugger statements in. I'm trying to log output. I can't really get anywhere with it. I'm stuck. And also, it's worth noting that search, like Google, won't help me with this. I don't really have anything tangible that I can search here. I'm not even getting a line number where the error is. The error that I'm getting back is just pointing to the terminal line number up here. So I'm totally stuck. And so what do? Well, I'm going to jump into my new favorite dev tool, ChatGPT, and throw this in and just be like, hey, help me out a little bit here. So ChatGPT, let's make a new chat. And I'm going to simply give it, hey, help me fix this. Help, I am stuck. What's wrong with this? And I'm going to put this code in. I'm going to use Markdown syntax, and the only reason I'm really doing that is that ChatGPT tends to give back Markdown syntax, but I haven't found any boosts in inputting with Markdown yet. And so right away, it looks like there's a couple issues here, and the most frustrating error in history, the initialize method is misspelled. Great. I can't spell. And I spent all that time thinking I wrote some sophisticated code error in one of these loops I'm doing. Nope, I spelled initialize wrong. And so if I really envy you if you've never had a mistake like this when you're programming. It seems to happen to me a lot. But I go back and yep, initialize is spelled wrong. I fixed that in a way when ChatGPT solved this error that search and I could not get find help anywhere for. So I really like that example because it contrasts like these new things that we can do, right? All these tools that we have for linting, and it just didn't catch it, but ChatGPT did in just milliseconds. Really cool. Another great use case is for crawling documentation of open source repositories. I am using ChatGPT much more for basic documentation questions than I am going into like API doc or the React docs or any of these other repositories. So let me show you an example. I'm going to be copying and pasting from VS Code a little bit here. So I'm going to jump in. And so in this example, what I was trying to do is I was trying to override the persisted method in a Ruby on Rails model. And I just had no idea really how to do that, but I needed to know how this persisted method was implemented. So I first tried the usual way, like the pre-ChatGPT way. I tried to go into the open source repository, navigate to where this persisted method is defined, and try to find the code. It was really hard to find the source code. And so I jumped in to ChatGPT, and sure enough, boom, here's the source code for persisted. And I could even ask a follow-up question to say, where is this defined? And I could ask it to give me a link. So crawling documentation and trying to find source code, really big boosts if you use, in my opinion, with ChatGPT. So let's look at some more advanced examples. So transforming code. Stay with me a little bit on this one. This is the biggest chunk of code that I'm going to show you here. So this is a Ruby script. And again, all these are real examples. So this is an example from a few days ago. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look up all of the daycares in Barrie, Ontario. This is, not for personal use. This is actually part of the repo that we're doing. I just changed the type of thing that we're looking for. And to do that with the Google Maps API, I need to make sort of 3 requests. I need to request the long lat of Barrie first, and then down here, I get the location, and then down here, I go and I query for all the daycares, and then for each of those daycares, I kind of have to go and get information about each place. And this is a script. This is basically copy-paste from the Google Maps documentation. So now that I've got it to a place in the console where this is all working, I probably want to make it a little bit more object-oriented and put it into my code base. So I want to make a class. So I'm just going to go and grab all this code, all this Ruby code, and I'm going to ask ChatGPT to take this Ruby script and format it into a class. And if I was doing this sort of, for reals, I would probably put my context paragraph in as well, but we don't really need it here. So I'm just going to dump it all in. And here's the result formatted as a class. You see it made a class called Daycare Finder. It's initializing with my API key, city radius type. And it's got a method in here that's called find daycares. And it goes in and it grabs all my code, my long lat, and then it's going to output a bunch of results onto the page. And this code, I'm not going to run it right now for time considerations, but this works out of the box, works perfectly. So let's look at the next example. We're going to build on this a little bit. Okay, so we saw how we can transform code easily. That works really, 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 really well. It also works with refactoring. Let's get it to write some documentation. So this is one of my favorite examples. And I'm going to motivate this with this is the only example of a sort of intermediate advanced prompting technique. It's called generated knowledge prompting. It's really cool. So instead of jumping in and just saying, hey, write documentation for this class, I'm going to do, because it's going to do only a mediocre job at that, and I'll ask you to take my word for it. Instead, I'm going to ask it to describe what the best practices are for in Ruby for writing a class and writing Ruby class documentation. And it's going to give me a really good list of best practices. It's going to say keep the methods small and make them understandable and use documentation techniques like Yard, etc. Great. And then the next prompt I'm going to do, so I've asked it to generate knowledge now, and that's what it did. It generated a lot of knowledge you can see on my screen. And as a follow-up prompt, I'm going to say, hey, just use this information and rewrite the class you created. Like, do better, ChatGPT. And it does. It does a great job. So it's writing documentation in here. It's following some conventions. It's giving examples in the comments. It's also, in some cases, it'll refactor too. So let's see if it does here. Yep. So now we have private methods. And so it's broken out the geocoding city into its own method. It's just really powerful for doing these things. So if you're like me and when you're writing code, you tend to just have like a quick one-line comment, using ChatGPT to expand that out into like RDoc or Yard so that you can see across Visual Studio, the documentation can be really, really helpful. I'm going to do one last example just for time considerations, and I want to show you the data manipulation example. This is really cool. So building off what we just did, let's look at some data manipulation. So here's the actual output of the response from that Google Maps API. So if you look at it, the data, it's really tough. So each one of these arrays here, I know it's small on your screen, let me make it larger. Each one of these arrays is one business. So imagine you're at Google Maps and you clicked on a particular business. And you'll see it's an array of objects that have a property called long name, which really is just a bunch of text. And then they have this type property that's an array. And this type property tells us that this is a street number, a route, or this array has two elements, that it's locality or political, administrative area too. But really what I'd really like is, pretend I have just like 10 of these results and I just need a YAML file for these 10 results. That's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to say this represents output from the Google Maps API, and I'm going to ask it to reformat all these objects in YAML. And that's going to be my ask of ChatGPT here. And let's do it. So I'm going to say, reformat these in YAML. And now by giving that context, remember we talked about the types of elements in that prompt. So I give it the context of this is output from Google Maps API. It is aware of the documentation of that API. So when it goes and reformats this YAML file, let's see how it does. Yeah, and it does just basically a perfect job. It spits it out, it's perfect, and it's remorted. I've changed the property names, but it's able to follow it perfectly, and spits out a perfect YAML file that I could copy paste and go off to the races with. It's really, really cool. And just some other, creating forms, writing tests is a huge boost. Doing spreadsheet functions that are complex, learning about a given topic is really powerful with ChatGPT. You can give it a prompt, I'll just show it to you. Where you can say, you are the world's greatest teacher. You explain concepts with examples. You use the Socratic method of teaching. And then ask it a question like, how does authentication work on a website? And I find that in some cases, this is a much easier, more natural way to learn than trying to go and find and read a big blog post. Okay? So just getting near the end here, here's my biggest tips. So create the context paragraph. I want to also stress these 2 points, which is be mindful what you're sending to OpenAI or any third party. So if you work for a big company, be very careful putting any work data into this API without proper consideration and approvals first. So you may not want to throw company information or code into any third-party service, even if it's going to help you write code better. Next, watch for hallucinations. So anything that it spits out that is important information to you, make sure you validate it, because a hallucination in these large language models, it just makes stuff up. That's what it is. Next, make use of generated knowledge prompting like we saw. This is important, is these models know nothing in their current state as of March 31st, 2023. They don't know anything after September 2021. That was when their data set was cut off. You can control how chatty it is. Okay, so in your prompt, you can say, don't give explanations. Don't worry about spelling, sentence structure, just get it all out. And use Markdown. And then this is my last tip, is think bigger. Try to do even more. Try to push it to do even more. And I want to end this with one final thing. I know I'm a little bit over. I'm sorry, Becca and Dan. But you can access these ChatGPT programmatically through an API. And what that lets you do is it lets you build really cool apps extremely easily by basically doing exactly what we did. So let me show you one I made for a friend. This is a fun little few-hour project I made for a friend that uses ChatGPT under the hood. I call it the Chiropractor Blog Post Writer. And I'm going to take a little prompt here and copy and paste it in. And this is a friend. He's a chiropractor. He has to write blog posts for his business. And he works collaboratively with some others. But they have to be kind of long, technically written blog posts, and they take a long time. So I wrote an app where he can take a single sentence describing like, hey, somebody came in and they had a sprain in the right trap. They didn't have any pain, and we're not giving any information about the treatment. We just said the patient was advised to see a chiropractor. And then what I've done is I've combined that input with a context paragraph about who my friend Brock is and what he's an expert in and the type of philosophies on his training. And it spits out a perfect blog post. And the cool thing here that I'm going to highlight is it uses technical language. It talks about abduction, external rotation. It even suggests treatment paths, and then he can just crop this down and edit it. So you can go and use these APIs to make really cool things. And that's the end of my talk. Once again, all of my code, all the prompts I showed you, including my context paragraph, and one example that is amazing, but we would never have time for, is on my GitHub, which you can access easily through my Twitter. And that's it. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the talks.
Thanks so much, Matt. And I posted Matt's Twitter and his GitHub and his LinkedIn at the beginning of the talk, so you can check it all there in the chat. I love ChatGPT. I use it all the time, every day. I just tweeted about it this morning. I say every morning I go to the gym and I lift heavy weights and I teach people about ChatGPT, and that is not a lie, because it is very much a part of my day. So I appreciate being able to dive into this a little bit more and learn more about that. So if you have questions, hit Matt up on Twitter. You can post them in the chat. Some of the questions I pulled in and sent it to Matt in his DMs in case he has some response that he wants to share with you. And we're very happy to have Matt here and to talk about that. And now we're going to be talking with Roger Gentry, who is going to be talking to us about Domains DNS, the map that makes the internet. And Roger's managed the security and compliance for clients across the United States, providing CTO, CSO level consulting to a variety of industries. He's worked with customers to achieve successful compliance certifications from PCI, ISO, SOC, and more. And we are incredibly happy to have him here today to teach us a little bit more about what all of that means.
Awesome. I've got a slideshow that I just need to get up here somewhere. So we're just go ahead and do that. So today we're talking about domains, DNS, and the map. But first I want to tell you about maps a little bit. Specifically latitude and longitude, which are the horizontal and vertical points that give us these magical numbers that we use to find things on a map. For example, this airplane boneyard in Tucson, Arizona, it can be accessed sometimes by searching for this on Google, but more directly by using the latitude and longitude. And the reasons why this is important is those are very similar to IP addresses, which are the numerical designation for every device, both on the internet and on your local network, which is a block of numbers, which is 192.168.1.1, which is how we identify things that we're looking at for our networks. Each one of these things comes from either your network router or your ISP. There's some that are different. There are some that are public and some that are private. The ones that are private are the ones that are within your local network, and the public ones are really more what we're focusing on today. Those are assigned by the ISP, which is your internet service provider, which is bought or rented or leased or has been allocated from a central registry that says these are all the IP addresses that you can assign to your users. So let's talk about that for a little bit. So public IP addresses are kind of the backbone that makes the internet. They're like the phone numbers, and everything has one, from the ATM machine to the phone in your pocket and just about everything in between. And a lot of times they're not only accessible, but they're vulnerable to any sort of open port or any unnecessary thing that we have going on there. But memorizing IP addresses could be a little bit difficult, just like memorizing GPS coordinates are a little bit difficult. After all, it's just a numerical label that we're assigning to everything. And humans are not naturally very good at memorizing a ton of numbers. I mean, just imagine if you had to type in the IP address for Google every time you wanted to search for something. That would be a nightmare. So there are some similarities between both the IP address and the GPS coordinates. They're long numerical things that identify a unique location or device. We have GPS locations that will tell us any place in the world, and an IP address will vaguely get us there, but we have some things to consider. So as I mentioned before, we have a central registry of IP addresses that are then designated to these regional internet registries. So if you were really into kind of viewing the matrix or understanding every IP address, you could look at one and know just by the numbers inside which country that it's associated with. But that's kind of like an address book for every city, and it's just too much. And that's where domains come in handy. So domains are kind of the human readable way that we are getting this information, like going to google.com or Facebook. It's the branding, it's the memorable online identity, and it's kind of the thing that we all look at when we're accessing a website. If you know me, you know I love domains. I've got hundreds of them because, well, they're fun to get. Everything from my own name to, Big Rat Dot Pizza, which literally is just a quote about how it's meal prepping if you buy a whole pizza. But they're also significant for branding. Like a good domain is worth its weight in, well, gold in some cases. They've sold for tens and hundreds and sometimes millions of dollars just because some people want to have a short, memorable domain. Like look at Twitter. Like they imagine if their name was tweetthisnow.com. It's not as cool. So domains give us the ability to find things on the internet, but they require a few steps. One of them is using a domain register. So one of these guys, for example, named Silo, Two Cows, Hover, Gandhi, will allow you to go through and register a domain. But what actually happens when you register that domain is you're collecting something that's available, meaning nobody else on the internet is using that particular set of numbers combined together with a .com, .net, or whatever. And you go through and you provide the required information for registering that domain, your payment information, and how long you want to register that. Once you have filled out that form and submit it, you get the domain. But unlike buying a piece of property, you still have to pay kind of taxes on it every year. And if you forget and that domain expires, well, it's open up for someone else to buy. So it's kind of more like renting. You're renting the domain from the internet for your usage. And DNS kind of connects the two. So we've talked about the IP addresses, which allow us to find the resources on the internet, and the domains, which allow us to have a brandable way to do it. So the DNS servers are actually responsible for the whole bit of all of this and how it works. And if you've ever tried to learn any about this, the videos and the education kind of dives into this a lot. But for our purposes, we're just going to do a high overview about what all of this means. So DNS translates to domain name server, which is what happens when you type in google.com. It goes through a series of requests. The first one is to whatever's locally configured on your machine to say, is this a machine that's locally on this network with a private IP address? If not, it goes to the next step, which is your DNS resolver, which says, do I have this cached in memory to understand where to go? If not, go to the next step. This goes all the way up to the root directory, and each domain, like a .com, has their own sort of registry. So for each .com, going a little fast here, for each .com.org.edu, each has their own set of servers, and inside those servers is just a list of other servers to check. So when you register, RogerGentry.com, it's listed in the .com registry, but the only thing that's actually there are your name servers. Those name servers are what contain the records for everything that's on RogerGentry.com, for example. But that's not the only type of domain that we have. We have a lot a lot of different types of top level domains, as they're called. Everything from what we're used to as .com, .orgs to country code specifics. These ones are assigned for specific usages of the country, like .us, .uk, which .us doesn't get used a whole lot. UK and .ca I see a lot more for identifying things like Amazon.com specific for the UK or specific for Canada. But we also have a lot of these newer domains like .app, .io, .shop, literally any extension you can think of can actually be a top level domain in this case. Google actually has .google, and I think Apple owns .apple. But what happens when you access any of these domains is just the same. It goes up the ladder to check to see if you know it locally, your resolver knows it locally. If not, it reaches out to the Internet Address Book to find it. So when I say all of this is like a map, this is kind of the place name. Instead of saying, the GPS locations for the United States, we would just say the United States, and it's generally recognized what that means. If you don't know it, you'd go look it up and find out what that means and translate it backwards. So let's talk about some of these records here, because we talked about the domains, which translate from, say, example.com to an IP address. This one's a private IP address, so it actually wouldn't go anywhere. But then we also have some other things. So we have a CNAME, which is where you can take a subdomain like www. Which actually stands for the World Wide Web. Not commonly used as much anymore as we used to when we started doing all of the magic of the internet. And that translates it to a separate domain itself. So you can have multiple domains pointing to another server, and then this record would translate to the IP address. It's one to the other. Same way we'd look up the domain, it kind of creates the whole circle. But furthermore, we also have other types of domains like MX records, which is how you would configure an email across your own domain. So instead of using Gmail, you would have Roger Gentry as your mail server, for my instance, and then anybody that wants to email you just has your email address on your domain. But if you ever try to change mail providers, you no longer want to use Google, you want to switch to somebody else, you can just change the MX records on that domain, and the new emails that flow into that will then be routed to the correct destination. Same thing, that gives you kind of the power to self-host and control where your presence on the internet is going to be, and route that to somewhere else if you want. It gives you kind of control of your online presence, your own internet, if you would. But there are a lot of other records. The other one that I want to really talk about is the text record, because these are the ones that are going to be used most commonly. Like if you've ever set up a website or doing anything to have a presence outside your local network and you have a domain, these are pretty commonly the 4 records that you're going to manage or do anything with. Text records can be used for all sorts of things, from validating your mail servers are correct, to securing your domain with your register, or to just having some silly information that happens when you look up the domain. So if you do a lookup for the text record who.rogergentry.com, it will give you an idea of who I am. And I mean, this isn't something that everybody has, but it's certainly something that you can take advantage of, using the text records to store information that, well, whatever you want. I've tested some things, just kind of seeing like the limitations on that. And some providers have a cap on the number of characters, but if you can fit it into a tweet, you can pretty much fit it into a text record. So you can have some fun with other uses for DNS that are non-standard, that are not trying to route somebody to their destination. But at the same time, DNS has a lot of sort of security issues around it, such as DNS poisoning or spoofing and other attacks. And a lot of this comes down to kind of DNS reflection attacks. That's a common form of a dynamic denial of service, where you use the DNS server to request the records for basically your attack vector, and then it amplifies that. So a lot of providers have safeguards in place to prevent those types of attacks from happening. Same thing with DNS spoofing and cache poisoning. That's something where instead of attacking their authoritative root record on the correct server, they'll go into that resolver, which happens before it checks the larger internet registry to where it's supposed to go. So it could exist on your local network. Your router gets hacked and somebody's going through and says, anytime that you're trying to access your bank, instead we're going to send you to this fake bank. And it looks correct because the DNS is, apparently there, because we've poisoned, what your record, your computer thinks it has. So there are some things that have implemented, as when I say we, I mean the overarching internet beings that manage these things. such as the DNS security and DNS over HTTPS. So the first one works with your register and creates an encryption key that you then store in your DNS that says these are the things that are supposed to be correct between the two. If they are not correct, that means that something happened in between you getting the record and us posting it in the cache or something else that is not valid. And so your browser would know to say, hey, I'm going to check something else before I route you to that site. And DNS over HTTPS is interesting because DNS as it exists now is its own sort of protocols. Your computer knows how to do all of these things built into it on the operating system that the browser uses to get this information as to where to take you on the internet when you type in a domain. But DNS over HTTPS treats DNS as if it was a website, which bypasses a lot of censorship that can happen when they're blocking the protocol for DNS or redirecting that. And so this sends it instead over as if it was its own website and then pulls the DNS over a secure connection. So layers upon layers of routing that can happen. There's at each step, there's a problem, there's vulnerability, and then there's ways that we can mitigate against that. So part of the registration process, when you're buying a domain or setting this up, you have to submit your own information in. And if you're just doing this for the first time, you may not understand that when you buy a domain and you have it registered to you, just by default, all the information that you submit for that registration process is public. And you can just look it up on some of these websites. gwhos.org is a good example. And you type in the domain name and it will oftentimes tell you who the owner is. Now, not everybody necessarily wants that. If you're a large corporation that has a mail department that can filter through the number of spam that you're going to get there, and oftentimes they want to have that to build a layer of trust to say we are the owner of this site. But for the most part, that system has become less and less useful as it's most commonly used for spammers. So you can actually set up your domain, and a lot of the providers will offer what's called private registration. So they have a proxy that they set up so that any contact that is sent to the contact that's listed for your domain register is then passed over to you. But your actual private information doesn't show up in these publicly available databases, which is a requirement for registering the domain and having it available, is being able to say we have a publicly available technical content. And that comes from when all of these standards were designed and built, we wanted to have an overarching address book as when there's a problem where we have questions, who to go to. And so that is the end of the slides that I have. And kind of just a summary there, if I was to give this in a few sentences, DNS and domains are basically the translation of country names to their locations as a GPS point on a map. So when you think about these things in the future, you say domain, think country, and then translate that to an IP address. So it's not that big of a mystery. It's not that big of a crazy black box as sometimes it is perceived, but it is inherently complicated. And I hope this kind of simplifies it a little bit.
Thanks so much, Roger, for teaching us about all of that. I know that's really great information. And I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to ask questions if you want to in the chat. And we'll make sure that Roger gets those questions. We're going to move forward with our next talk, the last talk before our break, before the next set of talks. And today we're going to be talking, Amy is going to be sharing with us Regex Crash Course. And Amy is a senior software engineer currently working at Mural. She loves information, human interaction, solving problems, helping people and cats, not necessarily in that order. Also, Amy would prefer to sing rather than to speak in front of a group of people, but she is here and she's going to speak in front of us or sing it, which I 100% encourage. So thanks, Amy, for being here with us today and talking to us about Regex and giving us a crash course.
Yeah. Not singing this time. Tried to turn it into a parody song. Didn't have enough time. I wouldn't get it through in 10 minutes. So my name's Amy, and I'm going to give you a crash course in regex. So good at slides. All right. So what is a regular expression? A regular expression is a way to describe a pattern to match text. It's usually used for find replace or data validation for input that is strings. So the syntax is generally /pattern/flags. And I'm going to specifically be talking about JavaScript flavored regex. There are different flavors, so the syntax is slightly different across different kinds of regex. So flags are an optional parameter that modifies the behavior of the search. So generally in the wild, you will see the global flag, which means that you will match any occurrence in a string rather than stopping at the first one. The multi-line flag, which allows new line characters to be matched as though they are the beginning and end of strings. The Unicode flag, which allows for better Unicode feature support, and the ignore case flag, which means that you can write a regular expression and only have one case in the regular expression and it matches both. So like if you include capital A through Z, it will also match lowercase a through Z. All right. It's important when you're going to be writing a regular expression or thinking about solving a problem with a regular expression to really understand the problem you're trying to solve. You have to know the things that you want to match, but you also have to know the things that you don't want to match. And let's go through a simple example to show how important it is to really understand what you're trying to do. So this is a regular expression, meow, with a global flag. This is trying to match every instance of meow in a string, right? And it does succeed in that. You are going to match meow. Unfortunately, the word homeowner also includes the word meow as a substring. So when you have a regex that matches meow globally, you are matching meow, but you are also matching homeowner, which is not the intended target. So the way you solve for that is to make use of regex assertions. So the caret at the beginning of a pattern means that you're matching the start of the string, or in the case of a multi-line flag, the start of a line, and the $sign at the end of the pattern means you're matching the end of the string or the end of the line. So this means that every instance of meow, you are ensuring that you are only matching meow. This will work globally. It won't work. This is a poor example, I just realized, because unless you're having meow in as the only word in a line, it's not going to be super helpful. But it does solve for the no longer matching homeowner. So assertions are conditions that have to be met in order for a match to be possible, and they don't consume characters, unlike other parts of a pattern. So we've already covered the start of string and end of string assertions. Now there's word boundaries. So a word boundary is denoted by the pattern /b, and it's going to match before the first character in a string if that first character is a word character, after the last character in a string if the last character is a word character, or between two characters in a string where one word is a word character and one character is a word character and one is not a word character. We also have the inverse of this pattern. So in general, the pattern for regex is lowercase is inclusion, uppercase is exclusion. So a capital B is non-word boundaries. Then you have look-aheads, which are awesome. It means that you have a pattern, and after that you have a look-ahead. It can be a positive look-ahead or a negative look-ahead, but in the case of a positive look-ahead, it's saying you will only match this pattern if after that pattern, the contents of this look ahead is present. In the case of a negative look ahead, you're matching the pattern only if the next part of the pattern does not include the look ahead. So in the case of regex is negative look ahead full, you will be matching regex is in regex is awesome, regex is in regex is awe-inspiring, but not regex is awful. Then there are look behinds. That's the same principle, but the other side of the pattern. So you're looking behind your string to see if the contents of the string includes or doesn't include. So for a positive look behind, you're saying that this part of the string has to be present in order for the second part of the string to match. And the negative look behind, this part of the string can't contain what's in the negative look behind. and then you'll match the string. So with a negative, look behind dog's space and followed by rule. It will match the rule in cat's rule. It will match the rule in people watching this talk rule, but it will not match the string dog's rule. Then we have character classes. This is not an all-encompassing list of character classes. There are other character classes, some of them being my favorite Unicode property escapes. But these are the main ones you will see in the wild. Word characters, which is A through Z, uppercase and lowercase, 0 through 9, and an underscore. Non-word characters, which are everything that is not encompassed by a word character. Digit characters, which is 0 through 9. Non-digit characters, white space, which is space, tab, form feed, line feed, Unicode spaces, non-white spaces, and period is any character except line terminators, except when you have .all set. .all is a flag. .all will also match line terminators. And then you have disjunctions, and a disjunction is like an alternate. So X, in this example, X or Y, it will match X or it will match Y. It could be either. So we also have character sets. A character set is anything within it's like having a disjunction between different options if you have multiple options. So in this case, X or Y, it's the same as having X disjunction Y. But you could have multiple things in a character class to denote things that you want to match against in that for that character. You also have negated character sets. That's saying that you don't want to match any of the things included in the negated character set, but it could be anything that is not included in the negated character set, if that makes sense. So if you have a negated character set of F followed by aim, you would match game, tame, lame, but not fame. All right, question. Are these two regular expressions equivalent? We've already covered character sets and negated character sets, and we know that the capital D means non-digit, capital W means non-word, lowercase d means digit, lowercase w means word. So is the character set of non-digit, non-word equivalent to the negated character set of digit and word? The answer is no. All right. So because a character set is saying that something can match this or this, what it actually is doing is finding that something is not a digit. And that is the only thing it's not matching against, because if it's not a digit, it could be a word. So it's, imagine this, and a non-word, like because there's the overlap that a word contains digits, that's why it's matching everything except digits. Whereas if you use a negated character set of digit and word, you are matching everything that is not a digit and not a word. So this is an and this is an or. It's kind of important to know the difference. We also have quantifiers. Quantifiers are the number of times you want to match something. So you have a pattern, the pattern is followed by an asterisk. That means you want to match that that character 0 or more times. And the quantifiers only apply to the character or sub-expression that you're dealing with. So you can have a capture group that we're not covering in this talk, but a capture group is can be multiple things, and in that case, the quantifier applies to that group of things. But if you see it next to a character by itself, it's not in a capture group or a non-capture group, then it's applying only to one character. So if you have X and a asterisk, it can match X, it could match XXX, it could match XX, etc. X plus means it has to match one or more times, so you can't have no X. Whereas, like, if you have X asterisk, that's an option. It could also be it cannot exist. So it doesn't have to be in the expression in the string. Whereas when you have x plus, it has to be in the string at least once. Could be more. X question mark would be 0 or 1 time. So at most 1, at least 0. If you have the curly bracket followed by a number that is matching that many times, the curly bracket, a number, a comma means at least that many times, and curly bracket, number, comma, number is at least the first number and at most the last number. And that is all my slides, and I raced through that, so I'm actually done. Sorry.
Amy, there is no reason for you to be sorry. That was fantastic. We learned so much about regex and all of this information, lots of questions and comments in the chat. So I want to say, everybody who is watching right now, give Amy a round of applause because I think she did a very fantastic job. You can do it out loud in your own bedroom, but she will not hear that. So if you want to throw that in the chat, that is definitely cool too. And we are very happy that you were here to round us out in this first half of Lightning Talks. We're going to be taking a 5-minute break and then we'll be back with the second half. But you did an absolutely fantastic job, Amy. So thank you so much for being here to share with us today. We'll see you back here in about 5 minutes.
Hey, everybody. I don't know where Rebecca is, but she's coming soon. So this is the part where I get to tell bad jokes. I don't know. I don't know if that's right or not, but I think she's about to be ready. Oh, there she is. Is she ready? Here she is. Okay. I didn't have any bad jokes for thee either. So,
How dare you
what
not have
what are
any
you gonna
bad
do?
jokes? Sorry, I was trying to take care of this raspy throat that I have going on here. And I think I did not do the best job of timing all of those things. So, but we're back and we're happy to have you here with us to be continuing the second part of our virtual coffee lightning talks today. And we are going to be talking with Taiwo, and we're very excited to hear um sorry, Taiwo's talk about self-assessment, a growth pointer, and he's going to be talking about self-assessment. And he's a Nigerian-based software engineer working at Grace Health. He studied electronics engineering in university, but hasn't practiced for a day. He's a huge community person, loves open source and cats, and he's been an amazing part of our virtual coffee community. So I'm going to hand it over to Taiwo to get us started in the second round of Lightning Talks.
Hello everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. I'd like to share my screen. Okay. So good day everyone. It's afternoon over here, evening actually. Welcome. My name is Taiwo, and today I'm going to be talking about self-assessment and how it is a pointer to growth. So you might ask, okay, why self-assessment? Why not something else? Like it could be anything. Well, why not? Why not ChatGPT or yeah, because I really wanted to give a talk about ChatGPT. Well, I figured like a lot of our problems stem from our not knowing ourselves. The bulk of the disappointments we have in ourselves and others stems from comes from unhealthy expectations that we have of ourselves, which also links back to the fact that we don't know ourselves. We don't know our limits. We don't know our power. We don't know what we have and what we do not have. And this goes as much as affecting uh, potentially life changing decisions, decisions to do this. Who do I stay with? Who do I want to be in a relationship? Where do I want to work? And things like that. So I figured today I would like to talk about that. And since it's not a particularly techy conversation, it's something that affects everyone. So yeah, I figured why not? Let's talk about it. And let's move on. What's self-assessment? Because I'm not a professor, like Becca said, I haven't really practiced my major for one day. I'm just gonna give you the simple answer, and that's like assessing oneself. Okay, maybe you don't like that, but okay, I'll bite. I'll just go in depth a little bit, at least with what I understand as a self-assessment. So basically, self-assessment that will be the process, an introspective look into oneself. Like, okay, looking at yourself and reflecting about what your personal experiences, what your professional experiences are, your strengths, your weaknesses, your goals, your what's your purpose, what do you want from life, basically. And it's not just life, everything that makes up life. What do you want from your work? What do you want from your relationship? What do you want from your friendship and stuff like that? And basically determining the delta between where you are today and where you plan to be or hope to be tomorrow. That's very, very important in the conversation. So the knowledge of these things, yes, they might scare people, but if the knowledge of these things don't get you closer to your goals, your purpose, they will not take you far away from them. So most likely by understanding this, you get to do what? Strategize better. And that's really, really my understanding of self-assessment or self-awareness, as the case might be. And I mentioned something the other time, like, okay, the delta between where you are today and where you'd like to be tomorrow. That's kind of give like a connotation of a standard or like a reference point. Yes, I believe as human beings, we are dynamic beings. And if you personally, I would give an example. If I've never seen a badass engineer my perception of being a badass engineer will be different today. And today I aspire to be that kind of badass. If I've never really seen a person that was a badass engineer and a badass human being, like very, very good, awesome, human being, I would have thought, oh, is it really possible? Are engineers what I see them to be on Reddit? So self in this case might not necessarily be restricted to yourself. Yes, the bulk of the work starts with you, most likely ends with you. You get to do the rigorous work, but it also goes through other entities that it involves external entities and not necessarily yourself. So that could be your friends, that could be your mentors, that could be your family, and many things like that. That could be books, the people that you've never even met. So sometimes knowledge of those things, which you might get from sources, not necessarily yourself, will help in the bid to assess yourself. So now enough with all of this jibby jabber. What do I gain? We're trying to keep this talk short, not long. Well, what do I gain? There is a lot to gain and I think I might have mentioned quite a number of them. Foremost, you're gonna save yourself a lot of stress, a lot of heartbreaks, because knowing yourself will keep you level-headed at certain times, because okay, if I were to be in that person's shoe, I would have done this too, because you know yourself, you know what you do and how you do it. But in this case, I would say it increases self-awareness, and we know self-awareness is kind of it's central to a lot of things. It affects our self-esteem, the self confidence, it affects a lot of things. Like literally, it's very, very key to a human being, and it also improves goal setting. Like, for example, you're a junior, you don't even know how to write JavaScript, and your goals in the light of not knowing how to do that will reflect trying to get better if you were on the right path. But if you didn't know this and you started reaching for things that are not necessarily near to you, things that you're not supposed to even start to think about at this particular point. So knowing yourself, knowing your weaknesses, knowing your strengths and other things will help set your goals, improve it in a way that your goals are easy to reach, and you have better decision making, and you also have a greater sense of purpose and direction. You know what you want. Whatever you do it with intention and purpose. Like, okay, this is what I want from this. This is what I'm gonna get from this. So all of this and many more, which can be a little bit subjective, you gain from being self aware and assessing yourself in a way. If you do not know yourself, how do you know what you're capable of? If you do not know, okay, I'm a very, very person that excels in a very fast-paced environment, how do you know if you are able to do that? And yes, there is always risk involved, but sometimes knowing that, oh, I can do this, oh, I learn fast, oh, I can do this, can certainly help in making a lot of decisions. And like I said, sometimes it affects potentially life changing decisions. So that's it. How do I conduct self-assessment? To keep it simple, because this talk is already long, I would say SWOT analysis, basically. Now, this is among many things, this is just one of many things. Like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities that you have by the virtue of who you are, where you're from? What are those things that you have as an opportunity? And what are the threats? And I believe with regards to anything in life, if we break this down, that thing in life down, we can definitely sort this out. And with our strength, we capitalize on those. With our weaknesses, we try to improve those and, set the battlefield in a way where we will not be set up to lose. As a fish or as Aquaman, I'm not going to fight on land. Yeah, because I'm Aquaman. I'll take you to the sea and I'll most likely win. So things like that, I believe they're just one of many things. Although we have to mention that you also have to set time aside for reflection. It's important because we're human beings, we're dynamic. I'm 24. What I was 4 years ago is very different from what I am right now. And what I will be in the next 2 years definitely is different from what I am today. So it's a constantly changing thing, and you also have to constantly follow the trend. So there are challenges that comes with self-assessment, and I think the bulk of them is really is about staring at yourself in the mirror, and as it comes with a lot of vulnerability, because at that point, those things that you might have spent the whole of your life trying to run away from, those weaknesses that, yeah, the painful, you don't want to see them, you don't want to know them. Oh, my code doesn't look very well. Those weaknesses, when they stare at you, sometimes it can be a little bit daunting. But well, you try again, you embrace the challenges, you use them as opportunities for growth, and you know where to focus your effort on. And basically, a wise man really said, a man's reflection may be his toughest critic, but facing it is the first step towards growth and self-improvement. So a wise man said that yesterday. Yeah, that's very good. And this is a screenshot of a self-aware man, talking to ChatGPT because he doesn't know how to write it. Yeah, so self-aware, he knows it's gonna be hard to put that in the slide. Okay, ChatGPT, give me something that's short, and we can throw it in the slide. So yeah, self-aware, know your weaknesses, and figure out solutions to them. This is just an example of one of those. So conclusion, now I'm running up. Self-assessment is a very valuable tool for personal and professional growth. We need it. We need to look inward, take time to look inward, figure out our weaknesses, figure out our goals, figure out the goalposts, and set them right, and capitalize on our strength to win. Make sure we don't we work on our weaknesses so that we can get better, and overall, everyone will be better off. Thank you very much. I hope it's as short as I planned it to be. Hello.
Thank you so much, Taiwo. That was great. I think self-assessment is one of those things that we need to constantly build into our routine, because it can be really hard to get back on track if we've fallen off the self-assessment train. And it's something that helps us to move forward even when it's really hard. So we very much appreciate you being here to share all of this information with us. And we're very excited to welcome Meg as our next speaker, who's going to be talking to us about low-key stalking for the job seeker. I've seen her slides, and her first one really sets the tone. I really enjoy it. But a little bit about Meg. She's a Ruby on Rails developer with a passion for open source and tech for good. She's always smiling, continuously learning, and quick to strike up a conversation. She takes her advice with a grain of salt and a shot of tequila, and she is one of our most active and amazing members at Virtual Coffee. Thank you so much, Meg, for being here to share with us.
Thanks, Becca. That's very nice of you to say. Yeah, and are my slides up? I can't tell.
Right now, I don't see anything. We've got a black screen going on. You want to try and present them in a different way? If not, I do have the backup set of slides.
Okay, because I'm screen sharing. Is that okay?
Yeah, try that one more time. We'll get them up. Okay, so right now, there we go. Just hit present and you'll be good. Why is it not good? It's black.
No? Okay. Oh,
I saw them before.
It's still black.
It is still black. They were there before you hit the present button. So I saw the Canva outline and we were able to see what was happening there.
That's okay. I have them on Adobe PDF. I can do it that way.
That's a good call. I also have Canva slides, so I'm going to go back those up while you're talking.
Can you see these?
I think you have to reshare, right, Dan? Let me remove that. Try and reshare.
Oh, okay. Sorry about this technical difficulty, everybody. I was how about that?
Okay, I see us speaking. So if you can change it to the Canva tab, maybe that will help.
I'm on the Canva tab.
Okay, it's still just showing us. Let me pull up the slides from the Google Drive.
Thanks. Sorry about this, everybody.
It happens.
So entire screen. Allow.
I don't know how to make this full screen though.
You're seeing behind the scenes now.
All right, this is how we do the thing. This is how we make it work. That's right, Brian. We need a lightning talk on debugging production.
What about?
Okay, I do have the Google Drive, but the slides are not. They are opening as a Google Doc and not as a Google slide.
What about this?
Okay, that looks good.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Got it. Woo, woo! All right. Round of applause. Everybody in the chat, give us some happy face emojis and some hearts. All right.
Yeah.
And let's get Meg started and low-key stalking for the job seeker. Thanks, Meg.
Okay, so the big reveal, my first slide. Yeah, my presentation is called Low Key Stalking for the Job Seeker. So picture this, you finally found your perfect job, or like something that you really, really want, you know? This company, the values align with everything you're feeling. You'd feel really great contributing to their philosophy. The actual job itself is something that seems super interesting, something you're into or really excited to learn. And you're like, okay, let's do this, let's get it. But how do you stand out from this huge pool of candidates that you know is going to be also applying for this awesome job? Like, how do you tell them, hey, I'm perfect for you? So hopefully these tips I have will help you do that. These are your tools that you can use to research deeply into the company, the job, hiring managers, employees, all that goes into the job search, job application process. Just try a different approach. I use this to shake up my job search. Hopefully you will too. LinkedIn, it's definitely a go-to for everybody. You'll hear people give suggestions, and some people are a little bit intimidated by some of the suggestions. So I'm going to talk through some of them. Social media, these are tools. People put their lives on there. Use it. GitHub and GitLab, GitHub definitely being the more popular one, and email tools. And I'll explain a little more what I mean by that later. For LinkedIn, leverage it. Use your connections to get to second connections. So what I mean by this is if you are looking at a user that works at a company that you're interested in, they might be an employee you're trying to approach, or a hiring manager, or you have an interview and you're like, awesome, I want to know more information before going into it, and you know the person's name, you might see like that second next to them on your profile. That means you're connected with someone who is also connected to them. And it will show you on their profile, it will say like at the top, you have these connections in common. Reach out to that person you have in common. chat them up, say, hey, how's it going? How have you been? And then say, I'm looking at this job, or I got an interview for this place, and tell them how excited you are about it first off, and say, I see that you're connected with so and so. How did you meet? Sometimes they're going to say, oh, I actually don't know them. They just reached out to me and I said yes. Okay, that's kind of a dead end. Sometimes they might be like, oh, we used to work together at this company. They're a really cool person. Or we met at a networking event and chatted, and we just connected after that. Either way, ask for an introduction. If they used to work together, if they're actually friends, awesome. Ask them to introduce you via email, even if you can. Then you skip that whole LinkedIn, because really that LinkedIn dance is to get to the email, get in their inbox so you can have that direct link. Hopefully you can find that kind of connection. For another thing that people do a lot on LinkedIn, myself included, is they'll put their resume up. When you can upload documents, you can keep your up-to-date resume on there. And what's on a resume? Your email, your phone number. Some people put their address on there, and they get hired and forget about it. They forget to take it down. Use that. Like, it might seem a little stocky, but hey, they left it up there. If they say, where'd you get my email? Well, your resume's on your LinkedIn. So I thought I'd just reach out because I saw this and that and the other thing on your LinkedIn, and I thought it was really interesting, and I wanted to ask you about it. You just kind of pivot, steer away. But if you just straight up tell them, then they're going to be like, oh, I didn't know it was still up there. I better take that off. Third thing, stalk. Look at their profile. See where they used to work. Look at the company you're interested in, the specific department, if there's other people who work in the position that you're looking at, and investigate into it. Look at these users, if they're a career changer, what they used to do, where they went to school, if they went to college, where they're located now, their LinkedIn activity, if they've made recent posts, so that when you speak with them, you have talking points. You have something that you can genuinely say, I saw this and thought it was really intriguing. Or, hey, you went to this college? I went there. And a lot of people will add their website, their personal website, a blog, and their social media links on their LinkedIn as well. Again, with the personal website, there's a lot of people that have their resume on there too. So the social media links bring us to social media as a tool. If they have their social media links on there, just follow it right from there. If not, you can just go to the platform and type in the person's name, like Twitter, GitHub. I'm not well versed in Instagram, but I hear it's like a thing the kids use these days. So you can go on there and type in their name. And usually, especially with Twitter and GitHub, people tend to have kind of like professional ones where they list their place of employment. So if you can kind of see if you're finding the right John Daniels or not, and kind of narrow it down. And especially if the person has a website where they put blog posts, if they're a writer and you're going to be speaking with them in an interview or something, if they have any recent blog posts, it's just really great to skim one of those, because people are really impressed if you show up to an interview and you do your homework on them. If you have the names of the people you're meeting with and have looked into them personally, they're like, okay. They aren't kind of like, ugh, okay. It's definitely two different reactions. The first one, I've gotten more. Actually, I don't know if I've gotten the second one at all. GitHub. I didn't even put GitLab on here because, GitHub's pretty much dominating. But not to say GitLab isn't good. I love GitLab too. It has a place in my heart. But GitHub has this awesome search functionality, where you can put in the company's name. And most companies have like their own organization page, and they'll have like repositories of stuff they're working on there. It now allows you to list, like, users to list the company they work for in their profile, and like in a way where they can tag it. So users that work there, their profiles will show up when you search the company. Also, for companies that you are in the interview process with, and I used to do this all the time, usually they don't have their technical interview up online, but other candidates who have been in the application process have gone through their technical interview, and they put it up on GitHub for the company to be able to access. So if I'm applying to the virtual coffee company, I would type in virtual coffee and use one of the keywords that I put here, like take home, challenge, assessment, and 10 to 1, you'll see, and click to the repository when it gives the search options, you'll see repos named virtual-coffee-take-home or virtual-coffee-challenge, and just be able to click on it. In the README, it'll have like the prompt itself, and that way you can see what it is before it's even given to you. You can do it on your own, compare what you did to other people, their implementation. I even would look at what people have done and then go to LinkedIn and see if those people were currently working at the company. And if they were, I'd like pay special attention and be like, okay, they got hired from this, so what did they do? I definitely don't think that's cheating. I think it's using the tools. Don't copy what they did, but just look at it and learn from it. If you're applying to a company that's open source, this is even better. Go on their organization and start working away. You don't have to dedicate a ton of time. Pick up 1 or 2 issues and see how their process goes. And when I say working, I mean contributing to their open source. This will get your name and your work in front of the developers so that you can learn their process, their code base, and that when you apply, they'll see your name and they'll be like, wait, I recognize that, and be able to connect the dots. Like, that's invaluable. Like, imagine that your prospective employer and coworkers, like your manager, get to have samples, like trial of working alongside you beforehand. That would be a much less risky hire than just going through an interview process and being like, okay, they seem cool, let's try it, And if you have any questions about open source, come find me afterwards. I'd be happy to answer. Lastly, we have email tools. So there's free and low cost tools out there to search for email address formats, or if you have an email address that you think is valid, you can verify that by plugging it into a tool and it'll check if it can actually send. Alternatively, you can visit a company's website and look at their like newsroom, their press inquiry. Usually they have something called like media inquiries. Go here. And sometimes it says like press at virtualcoffee.com, but other times it might have like the actual person's name, like dan.ott at virtualcoffee.com. So that way you can find out the domain format from that. And here's some examples of some of the things I was talking about. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So here's an email tool called Mail Tester. I will post all these resources like the email tools and other resources in the VC events channel after this, for anybody who's posting in the chat right now asking. But this one specifically is email format, is called. And Broadridge is a company. So I put it in here to search for domains, and it came up with high confidence that first name dot last name at broadridge.com is their email address format. In this tab, if you click on it, it will show you actual emails that it had found by crawling the web that are verified. Here's another example from Autodesk, where I went to their media contacts website and found their email format because it has like their actual media contact representatives here. And then here is an example of an open source company called Esri. They're a geospatial mapping company. And I think I may have applied to them at one point because I love maps. But if you're into that, definitely check them out. But as you can see, there are 656 repositories. There's a lot to do here and a lot to pick from. So if you're interested,
This is great, Meg.
yeah. And to wrap it all up, why should you be a total creep? I'm saying that tongue in cheek. Finding something you have with a prospective employer or coworker can make a huge difference. Like you can have just an interaction with someone and it'll be, forgotten, just written off, or it can be completely memorable because you bring something up that they're like, oh, wow, like we do have that in common. Or, oh, you read that blog post? Oh my gosh, thanks. Thanks a lot for complimenting me on that. Building a commonality or having a commonality builds trust, and building relationships starts on that trust, because networking's a long game no matter what. So this is just like a different way to go about it. And hopefully these tips helped you out. I do have a story of myself using these types of things, and I'd be happy to share it in Thursday morning accountability buddies for anybody who'd like to join. And thank you everyone for coming and watching.
Thanks so much, Meg, for sharing this. I know that this is a topic that we commonly talk about at Virtual Coffee, and to like have this here and a video on this, I know it's going to help a lot of people. So we really appreciate that.
Thanks.
All right. Next up, we have Josh Goldberg, who's going to be talking to us about what a linter is. He's an independent, full-time open source developer and works on projects in the TypeScript ecosystem, most notably TypeScript ESLint, the tooling that enables ESLint and Prettier to run on TypeScript code. He's also the author of the O'Reilly Learning TypeScript book, a Microsoft MVP for developer technologies, and an active conference speaker, including our set of lightning talks here. So thanks so much, Josh, for being here to share with us about what a linter is.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Just checking, can y'all hear me? And I'm trying to present. There it is. Yay, cool. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. I want to talk to you today about everyone's least favorite developer tool, the linter. What is it? Why do we use it? And what is it not? Boop. So first about me, as Becca did a great job of saying, I work in open source full time and I work around these things. TypeScript ESLint is neither TypeScript nor ESLint. It is the tooling that lets you run ESLint and Prettier on TypeScript. So hit me up if that's of interest to you. Moving on, 3 sections we're going to cover today. What is a linter? What is a formatter, since those two get confused a lot? And for the love of all that is good, please stop using ESLint for formatting, please. AKA, why so squiggly? Static analysis is the umbrella term for tools that run on your source code without running the code itself. It's in comparison to dynamic analysis, things like unit tests, end-to-end tests that actually run your code and then assert that things are good. A linter is a static analysis tool that runs a set of checks, which you can configure, on your source code. It reads in your code, squints at it, and then lets you know if it thinks something is going to be wrong. Now, I'm going to pause here because that's really important. This cleaning thing, I thought it was cute, and I want to let that sink in. A linter runs a set of checks on your code and lets you know if any of them spotted something maybe bad. Each of those checks is called a rule, and each of those rules can be individually configured. They can take in options, and they may report any number of times in your files on code that they don't like. Each of those reports might contain an optional autofix, or a nice little way for the rule to suggest improving your code. And I'll give you an example of one rule and a reason why you might want to use them. Let's say that you want to use the latest and greatest fancy JavaScript syntax. And fun fact, there is an ESLint rule that lets you know, hey, if you use the x equals x or something else, you can replace that with this new fancy operator assignment or equals. So the rule would give you a little red squiggly in your error, in your editor, and it would suggest fixing the code to this, which is very nice. And then all your coworkers will think you're smart, and it's great. So you want to use lint rules, not just because they improve your code and not just because they teach you syntax, but because, like Frank Reynolds, you just want to be pure. Lint rules also can catch lots of bugs and stylistic inconsistencies and best practice violations. So definitely wait till the end of this talk to get some links to rule documentation. Section 2. What is a formatter? A formatter is a tool that reads in your source code, ignores your formatting almost completely, and rewrites your code according to its formatting preferences. And I'll give you an example of this one too. Let's say that you had some sort of weirdly formatted thing, like friend, new line, or equals, couple of spaces, me. A formatter would read this into a standard representation called an abstract syntax tree. More on that later. In here, we don't have to squint too much at it. It's an object describing it as an assignment expression where the left is the identifier friend, the operators or equals, the right is the literal quote me. Then the formatter would print this out in its own preference for formatting, friend or equals me. Note the nice standardized spacing and the insertion of a semicolon. Covering that AST thing again, an AST or abstract syntax tree, it's the format that static analysis tools read your source code into. So both ESLint and other linters and Prettier and other formatters represent your code in something that looks like this. It's called a tree because you have the root, which then forks out into its children, each of which may have their children. And as you climb the tree, much like this cute little panda, you learn more and get to the good stuff. Okay, last section. Stop using ESLint for formatting. Please, for the love of all that is good. A linter is not a good formatter. A linter is a tool that reads your code into an AST, runs a list of rules that you have configured and then can report back to you the results from each of those rules, which means it's nice and configurable, but it's slower because it has a lot more logic. And each of those rules has to do all their edge case for different, all their handling for different edge cases. Whereas a formatter is just a single pass. It goes through your code, reads it in, poops it back out onto the page, which makes it much faster, but it's not going to change your logic. That would require running slowly, like a linter. And everyone who works on linters hates that people use ESLint formatting rules. And I'm not even going to show you using them because I don't want you to do this thing. So if you don't have Prettier or some other formatter, but you do have ESLint, please use a formatter. That's all the information I wanted to spew at you. To recap, what's a linter? What is a formatter? Well, a linter is a tool that runs a set of checks. A formatter reformats your code. They're not the same. Don't use ESLint for formatting. And if you want to learn how to use these things and set them up, ESLint.org is the site for ESLint, the standard JavaScript linter. If you use TypeScript, you'll want to add in TypeScript ESLint, the tooling that I'm one of the maintainers of. And then Prettier is the most popular standard JavaScript formatter. Okay, thank you very much. Again, I'm Josh Goldberg. I'm at Joshua K. Goldberg on Twitter, Fostodon, and a few other places. Get up to. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Josh. And I threw your contact information in the chat so everybody can go ahead and follow you. That was a really great, quick walkthrough of all of that stuff, but I know it's pretty impactful, especially because we got some stuff in the chat that acknowledges all of the stuff that we've learned. So thank you so much for sharing that. And next up, we're going to be talking to Julia Seidman, who is going to be telling us about a great first chapter, New Employee Growth in Your Content Pipeline, which is a new model for using technical blogging. Julia is a technical marketing consultant and developer in the Seattle area. She has 2 terrific kids and a wonderful partner, and her family cosplays as a normal family. Julia is a believer in the career rather than the career, which you can check out more about on our virtual coffee podcast. And hopefully we can get Julia's video up here in 1 second. I am pretty sure I can hear you, Julia. If you want to go ahead and share your slides,
can you hear the Roomba running upstairs? Is that?
Don't worry about the Roomba. You're all good. So,
oh, what do I do? Share screen. Share screen. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't.
It's all right. Just work on getting those slides up there. We're super excited to hear more about technical writing. You do so much of that, and you've taught us a lot about it at Virtual Coffee, in our lunch and learns, and in our breakout rooms, and all the stuff that you do at the Tech Interview Study Group. Oh, I see slides. Right.
There we go. Okay. I guess I don't know why we're not going to see me, but that's okay. My hair is still wet, so we'll just see my slides, and that's fine. So I have been kicking this idea around for a while that kind of ties together a bunch of different aspects of my eclectic professional background. And it's something that I potentially would like to turn into like a consulting thing of my own. And so I thought as a first step, I'd try presenting the idea to all of you and see what you think. So with that, a great first chapter, New Employee Growth in Your Content Pipeline. So I want to first set up a problem space here. There's 2 problems that are going to seem unrelated to each other. And those are, first of all, a problem that is going to feel familiar to many of us, and that is that onboarding into a new role as a developer kind of sucks. You are really excited about getting your first, getting this new job. You're pumped to join the team. You think they make cool products. You're excited to learn some new tools. And you spend the first few weeks just disoriented and bewildered and overwhelmed and feeling like you're not producing anything and nobody knows what you're doing with yourself. A lot of us have been there, right? And then on the other hand, there's this seemingly unrelated problem that I'm very familiar with because it's the kind of the space that I work in now. And that is that there's a huge demand for quality technical content. And I want to emphasize that, like, what I'm talking about is technical content created by developers, people who are genuinely knowledgeable about what they're talking about. There's a lot of demand for that. There's a lot of people who want to learn, and there's a lot of crap out there. But the people who have the knowledge typically don't have the time, or maybe don't have the skills. And maybe if they have some of the skills and some of the time, it's still not enough to get something all the way to publication. So I had an idea. I have an idea for something that potentially, I can't believe the room is doing this right now, potentially could improve both of these issues at the same time. I've been a new employee. Now I'm a developer education consultant. And I have an idea. So here's my proposal. We're probably all kind of familiar with the idea of the like day one README PR, where, you know, someone says like, okay, here's the README for this project file. Oh my God, I am so sorry, but I think it's done. Here's the README, here's the project, install this, do that, read this documentation. And over the course of the day, you know, you're kind of wading your way through and you find some small error in the README and you make a PR and you're like, yeah, I contributed something today. But it's kind of a small win. And I have a feeling that it's something we could turn into a set of much bigger wins by making that written component of employee onboarding a more formalized program that would come with benefits for other people involved in your technical organization too. Managers who currently have to sort of like hope and pray that their new employees are learning the things they're supposed to learn, meeting the benchmarks they're supposed to meet for a while. Those managers gain much greater insight into what new employees are doing, what they're learning, where their potential strengths are, where they maybe need some more support. And DevRel and marketing teams could potentially gain a new source of that authentic technical content by actually codifying some expectations for content production for new employees. So, if we're going to make this work, there are a few things that you have to have. One of them is flexible objectives. The primary goal, if you were to implement this kind of program, has to be about employee growth. And I actually loved Taiwo's talk earlier about self-reflection. The power of self-reflection to spur growth is enormous. That is really at the root of this program. Written self-reflection is more powerful than virtually anything else, proven by research in all different domains, all different ages of learners. So really our main goal is to enrich the experience of individual new employees so that they can build on their strengths and learn to do their jobs more effectively. The written communication is a job requirement. If you're following this program, they've got to do the writing, but that's not the job So you're not going to be evaluating them on the quality of their writing. Not every employee is going to write stuff that gets published, and that's fine. They can still learn from it. You also have to have clear expectations. It can't just be keep a journal of what's going on this week. There would need to be appropriately determined objectives for individual employees, and different expectations at different job levels. The expectations of somebody who's coming in at a higher technical level are going to be different than somebody who's coming in as a junior. And then if you want to get the benefit of this type of program for your DevRel and marketing teams, you would need to provide some level of ongoing support. You do not want to set your new employees up to embarrass themselves with content that's not really ready for publication. And so you would need to commit to some level of ongoing professional editing support to kind of take the content that's produced through this program and kind of put it over the edge. So I want to compare two, just to kind of illustrate how this would work. We have a hypothetical new employee named Alex, and I'm going to just quickly go through two different versions of Alex's first month on the job. Alex is a new junior developer. They have a couple years of experience in support. They wrote for a college newspaper, have a Twitch stream. You know, we don't know a whole lot about Alex. They seem like they're going to be a good candidate, like a good new employee. They've got a lot of energy. Alex. So Alex comes in on the first day and gets this list of set yourself up with access to the API gateway, read this documentation, read that documentation. Here are some training videos, install this tool, build this project file. Here are a whole mess of readmes, and let us know if you have questions. We'll check in. There's no deliverables. There's not a lot of direction. There's not a lot of built-in reward either. It's frustrating. So a month in, Alex's team and manager, they think Alex seems pretty good, but they're not really sure. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of gut feelings, and not a lot of measurable results. That's a pretty standard first month for a new developer in many, many organizations. So how would that change with this great first chapter program? Well, Alex comes in, same person, but the onboarding is different. Week one, Alex gets, along with a list of all the stuff to read and projects to install and whatnot, also gets guidance on how to create a friction log. And a friction log is a user experience concept that just creates like a narrative record of everything that a user does when trying to use a tool. Why not do that for your new employees? Your onboarding process is a tool. How are users, your new employees, experiencing it? You could learn a lot and improve the process dramatically. And Alex gets the opportunity to feel like a meaningful contributor to the team from the very first week. Week two, Alex gets some guidance on how to do some self-reflection, like Taiwo was talking about. Additionally, how to, some self-reflection, some goal setting, and has the expectation of writing a couple of informal self-reflection posts that week. And in one of those posts, Alex mentions some experience with video production. Remember, they have a Twitch stream. So week three comes along. Alex is doing pretty well. Manager reads that and says, hey, I think it'd be terrific if you made a video about our our technical onboarding process. So Alex gets to work on taking what they have learned, from those first couple of weeks on the job and turning it into a video. Maybe nobody will watch it, but maybe they will. Week 4, more self-reflection on those goals, more journaling, and potentially a really meaningful blog post for a company website or for onboarding new employees in the future. And most importantly of all, Alex's team has much better insight into how they're doing, where their strengths are, and they've gained some fresh perspective on their products and their onboarding processes, and they have it written down. So, and then in that process, somebody from DevRel or marketing says, hey, Alex, we think it's really great that you have this video production experience, and we know it's not your job, but maybe we could work with your manager to carve out time once a quarter for you to be involved in creating some kind of video for our DevRel team. So the DevRel team gets this authentic technical content, somebody knowledgeable who's embedded with their technical teams on a day-to-day basis, and who has the communication skill and the desire to be part of that process. And it's a much lower cost than going out to another company, consulting, whatever. Okay, I have to skip my timeline, but I think, yeah, if you have, I'd love, like I said, this is sort of a proposal for something that I'd like to turn into a consulting business potentially. So I would love to hear any feedback anybody has, where you would need more information, what you would want to know about. Yeah, so reach out to me. And thank you all very much.
Thanks so much, Julia. I really love this proposal. And I know as a person in DevRel that this is something that I think a lot about. And you gave us a lot of really good questions and ideas to think about, something that I hope that we talk about a little bit more. And with that, I'm going to introduce our next talk, Taming Personal Knowledge Management with Obsidian and DataView, from Brian Meeker. Brian is a full stack engineer who occasionally leaves his basement in Indiana. Currently, he works as a senior engineer at Online Rewards and works mostly in Elixir these days, but has a past littered with a variety of technologies and platforms. Outside of work, Brian is a devoted father, an avid nerd, and a lover of metal. And I hope that is your most up-to-date bio, because I'm like definitely doubting myself right now. But thank you so much, Brian, for being here with us today. Oh, wait a minute. You are muted. I'll unmute you. I can't unmute you.
I had muted
yourself.
myself earlier. Thank you, Becca. Thanks everybody for showing up today. Yeah, like Becca said, I'm going to talk about personal knowledge management with Obsidian and DataView. Like she said, my name is Brian Meeker. I was a C# dev for a long time, recently switched to Elixir, and currently live in Indiana. So what is personal knowledge management? Wikipedia says that it's the process of collecting information that a person uses to gather, classify, store, search, retrieve, and share knowledge in their daily activities, and then the way in which these processes support work activities. But why would we want anything like that? For me personally, I've been a very organized note taker for over a decade now, but I always lacked a good way to review and aggregate those notes into something that was useful later. Way back in 2008, I started by using TiddlyWiki, which is a wiki stored in a single HTML file. You would open that file in your browser, make changes to it through forms, and it would just get saved back to the same HTML file. That worked fine for a while, but then browser security models changed and it didn't work so fine anymore to modify local files like that. After that, I moved to Evernote for over a decade, and that was fine and didn't get in my way. But then I tried using Notion at a new job in 2021, and I realized just how stagnant Evernote had become. I really like Notion, but its import from Evernote was completely broke. So enter Obsidian. Obsidian is an extensible personal knowledge management tool that just uses plain markdown files on your machine. It supports metadata and backlinks to make it easy to connect ideas and notes together. I like this. I like being able to write notes just in Markdown on my machine, but I wasn't sold on it until I saw DataView. DataView is a plugin for Obsidian that allows you to query metadata in your notes to create static or dynamic views. I knew that I was switching to Obsidian the second I saw this. This was what I had been searching for a long time. DataView itself supports 2 query syntaxes. This example here is from their docs. This is DQL, data query language. It looks a lot like SQL, and it's outputting that little table at the bottom. And then the examples that I'm going to show you are in DataView.js. It's their JavaScript API to allow you to execute arbitrary JavaScript and do mostly the same things as DQL, but you can get a lot more flexible. The challenge in using a system like this is it's very much garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have well-organized metadata, you won't be able to write the queries you want. For the purposes of this talk right now, I'm just assuming that your data hygiene is impeccable, and we're not going to worry about that right now. So you could use several types of metadata with DataView. First, Obsidian itself supports front matter, which is just a block of YAML at the beginning of each Markdown file, which we'll see an example of in a second. DataView also adds support for inline fields and tasks, but I won't be showing that in any of these examples here. And then finally, there's some implicit metadata on each file, such as its name, folder, link, etc. So let's look through some examples. Here you can see an example of the results from a query that pulls in books I read in 2022 and lays them out in a series of tables by genre. And this is the front matter on one of the notes. This is just plain YAML. We got some tag, title, author, various pieces of metadata. And we query that through DataView.js like this. Almost all these queries start with a call to dv.pages. That's just getting all the pages. But then we also want to filter it down by those that have the book tag and are in a folder called reading. Then we filter those to get those are either started or finished in 2022. And then we group them by genre. And then we iterate over each group and output a nice table like we saw back here. Let's take a look at another example. For the past couple of years, I've tried to write up a weekly work summary every Friday. These are useful to refer back to later for reviews, and they make it easy to communicate progress to the team. Recently, I started automating the data collection part of this. So as you can see here, there's different types of notes that I'm aggregating together, plus an other section is sort of a catch-all for stuff that doesn't fit into the established categories. And then here you can see very simple front matter that I'm using for each of those. Daily notes and meetings, those are single day things. Issues can last over multiple days. And then this is an example query. It's very similar to the last one. The underlying date library is Luxon, if you're a JavaScript dev who's familiar with that. We define columns in the table, and we call DV pages again, and we do some filtering just like we did before. Let's look at one more example. So years ago, I saw a talk that mentioned a team that tracked how they felt about Git commit messages. So each commit included a rating of how much the author liked it. And then this data could be aggregated to gauge how happy the team was. DataView only supports lists and tables out of the box, but if we want something more visual, we can reach for another plugin called Obsidian Charts. And the good news with this is it's just a wrapper around chart.js. So if you already know how to use that, you're good to go. So I'm not doing that with commit messages, but I do keep daily notes at work. And in my metadata, I have a vibes column. So every single day, I get to do a vibe check, and it outputs into, at the end of the week, in my weekly summary, it's a chart like this. So the first part here is very similar to the other queries we've seen. We're just mapping each result to a 2-element array containing the day of the week and the vibes. And then we define a bar chart just like you would with chart.js. I've been doing this for a couple months now, which probably means it's time for me to start aggregating the data even more into some sort of trends. I haven't got that far yet, but it's on the to-do list. So the QR code here and the links are to a demo vault for Obsidian that has all the data that I used for this. And so you can pull it down yourself and see and play with all of these examples. I encourage you to give Obsidian and DataView a try yourself. These examples are very simple and only scratch the surface of what is possible. There's a very vibrant online community of people doing absolutely ridiculous things with it. With that, thanks to everybody at VC who helps organize this and run the lightning talks. And I'm going to pass it back to Becca.
Thanks so much, Brian. I apologize for the delay on that. I think I accidentally co-opted your slides for a second there, so sorry about that too.
It's fine.
I was trying to get ready and it just went live. So I really appreciate you sharing all of this stuff about Obsidian. I'm an Obsidian user and I know that I don't use it to its full potential. So anytime you talk about it, I'm like taking all of the notes. So thanks for sharing that with us and for being here today. And I'm going to be closing out the lightning talks now. So thanks to everyone who has been here and who has listened to all of our talks. They'll go up on YouTube, broken down into each individual speaker soon. You can check out all of the things that we're doing at virtualcoffee.io. If you're interested in being a part of Virtual Coffee, you can check out virtualcoffee.io/join. This is the last day of our March monthly challenge, which is public speaking. And we're ending it with these lightning talks. Next month, we'll be going into a brand new year of Virtual Coffee. We started in April of 2020, and we're very excited to be continuing this on. And so we always do a community kindness challenge to remember the way that we started here at Virtual Coffee. And so with that, today I am going to be talking to you about the power of storytelling, human stories in a digital world. It takes one person to make a difference. One story that can change the trajectory of your career, your ambition, and your life. It's one story that you can tell that changes the trajectory of someone else's career, ambition, or life. And I'm going to tell you first the story that changed my life. I came into tech after I went through trauma. When I had my fourth child, 2 of my organs ruptured into each other. And I kept telling the doctors that there was something wrong. And I had all of these awful symptoms, but they didn't believe me and they told me I was fine. And they sent me home. A week later, I went in to see my OBGYN. And I remember sitting there in that hospital bed. And she told me, "You're not my problem." And I never felt so hopeless in my life. A month later, after fighting doctors and tests and trying to get someone to diagnose me, I finally had surgery. And during that experience, I accidentally overdosed on morphine and I had to be Narcaned, which is not ideal. But I went home with PTSD that was undiagnosed, anxiety. I had my first panic attack when I went home, and depression. And I felt alone. Like no one could possibly understand what I was going through. And after all, less than 1% of the population who had had babies experienced the same thing. So it was reasonable to believe that nobody else understood. And in the midst of all of this, about a year later, my husband, who was a second career developer, said, "Hey, you should learn how to code." And I just thought, this doesn't make any sense. But he was really persistent in that. And so, fine. I will try free code camp, and then you can stop bothering me about it. But here's the thing. When I started to code, the moment I started writing HTML, the cycling trauma that was in my head all the time, every day, repeating, it stopped. And that was the first break I had, the first moments of fresh air that I could breathe in, where I could feel like I was myself, that I could remember who I was. And so coding became therapy, and then it became community, and finally it became a career change. And I didn't forget the experience that got me to this point. In fact, it's the thing that's driven my goals and my purpose in tech. My primary goal is to connect others so no one feels as alone as I did in that hospital office when I was labeled as somebody else's problem. But that's not the story that changed my life. I received a full scholarship to Flatiron School boot camp, and I met with my educational coach, Katie McKenna. She had run my scholarship essay that got me to that point, and in one of our first meetings, she said, "Becca, I went through a trauma too. Do you mind if I share that experience with you?" Katie had been run over by a semi truck. And not only did she defy the odds by surviving, she defied them by walking again. And in the last year, she defied them one more time when she had her daughter and made it through pregnancy. But in that moment, when Katie shared her story with me, I didn't feel alone for the first time in a really long time. She said things that I had said to myself that I thought nobody else thought. And a couple of weeks later, I told her I was writing the story of everything that I had gone through, but I wasn't really sure why. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I torturing myself to write through this again? And she said, "Becca, we don't share our stories for ourselves. We share them to invite other people to share theirs with us." And that's the story that changed my life. And so, why am I telling you this right here today? Well, the connections that we find through sharing stories is often forgotten, deprioritized, or thought of as frivolous. But I think that it's more important than ever. The connection with Katie, it wasn't purely an emotional connection, it was a physiological connection. According to Ted Bauer in the neuroscience of storytelling, when we see or hear a story, the neurons in our brains fire in the same patterns as the speakers, and we call this neural coupling. So, in other words, when we listen to something that we relate to, something that we get excited about, somebody else's stories, our brains start to form patterns to make it like the other person's brains, like the speaker's brains, so we can understand the meanings and connect to their world. What happens in those moments? Well, we're more likely to open up and feel vulnerable. Now, if we look at this from a neuroscience perspective, let me see if I can get my slides to advance. Here we go. If we look at this from a neuroscience perspective, storytelling is effective for a couple of different reasons. We are hardwired for storytelling. Our brains light up when we hear stories. It creates connections that allow us to remember those connections. It activates our brains when we relate. Along with that, our bodies produce the neurochemical oxytocin. And this goes back to what Gant was telling us when we were talking about learning how to speak and engaging in that for the first time. When we hear stories that we connect to, our bodies produce oxytocin. This allows us to bond to others, to feel love, to be connected. And according to Paul J. Zak, oxytocin is produced when we are trusted or shown a kindness. And what does that do? It motivates us to cooperate with other people. It does this by enhancing our sense of empathy and our ability to experience other people's emotions. This connection and motivation is so empowering. It does this it does this, and we are empowered to trust others, to take risks, to be transparent, and to grow. And when we feel comfortable doing that, we're more likely to be supportive collaborators and to innovate in those moments. We're more likely to take risks and to do big and great things. But beyond that, our brains work to connect stories to help us to remember them. A part of the brain that's called the hippocampus helps us to weave the narrative of the disjointed stories that make up our lives, which allows us to connect to them even more. So what this means is most of our lives are not narratives. They don't follow a straightforward plot line, right? Like we learn it in school. There's a way that the characters go through the ordinary world and then they make progress. And then there's a climax of that progress and things fall. And then there's a resolution. Our lives are often not like that plot line. But our brains make the connections for us to help us to remember those things. So our brains are doing these things that we call, that Kohn Sheehy calls narrative memories. It connects our memories so we're better able to remember those events. So it should be no surprise to us that storytelling helps us to connect to our audience. Storytelling at its core is about sharing our experience, our knowledge, the things that have inspired us. So if your story isn't complete, if it's not linear, if there's no plot line to follow, don't worry. Our hormones and our brains are there to connect us to the people who are in our lives. It's probably not a surprise to any of us that studies indicate there's been increased loneliness during the pandemic. So tell me in the chat if this sounds familiar. You jump into meeting after meeting that's read off of an agenda, or you jump straight into work. And then we might have company-wide social events if we're lucky, but we opt out of those because there's too much to do, or we're too tired, or we're too burnt out. We prioritize productivity over connection. In other words, we're losing our opportunities to connect with others in meaningful ways. But humans are made to connect to each other. And we do that through storytelling. So how do we get started? Well, we start by telling stories that build trust. According to the article, Make Us React, the neuroscience of narrative, if you treat me well. In most cases, my brain will synthesize oxytocin and will motivate me to treat you well in return. And along with that, it creates a sense of trustworthiness in the other person. When we don't get that, it impacts our work environment. One of the simplest ways to connect through storytelling is missing in our everyday experiences. It leads us to feel more isolated in our work, and that contributes to burnout. Storytelling humanizes us. We're not another coworker, a support person, a cog in the wheel. Storytelling allows us to see each other as complex human beings, and it often helps us to connect to others that we see as different than us. When we see each other as complex human beings, we're more likely to approach each other with openness and empathy. And this is ideal for working together. This is what we want, to navigate conflicts, to come to an understanding when you disagree with someone else. So how do we build storytelling into our daily interactions? Well, within a company, storytelling allows for a shared understanding of the mission, the key priorities, clarity of the creation process. It allows us to help new employees to be onboarded and to establish a culture of innovation through storytelling. How do you connect to your company or your team? There are all of these opportunities to use storytelling to establish that company culture and to build trust. So, for example, storytelling increases effectiveness in mentoring relationships as well as transferring knowledge in the workplace, according to Dorothy Leonard. So we can do this often through mentoring. What makes a good mentor is someone who's willing to be open and vulnerable and knowledgeable. If there's documentation, anybody can find the answer in documentation, but that doesn't mean that they connect to it or they understand it in the context of the organization. That comes through the mentor. Tell your story of being part of the organization, your story and the historical knowledge that comes with that. What do you know about the people? What do you know about the team? How does that all work together? This becomes an opportunity to share a part of you, to connect to your mentee, and to recognize the coworkers who have made an impact in your life. Tell those stories. Who are the people that are there that have impacted you? In doing so, you help your mentee to recognize and to remember who to trust and who you find impactful, which also leads them to find that person trustworthy and impactful. So when we do this, we start to build a strong culture. So why is storytelling important in a digital world? Why is it important to us today in tech right now? We have the space to make connections, but we have to make the time. It's about connecting ourselves to our families, our friends, our teammates, and other people in the company. If you have a task and you automate it, take the time that you would have used for that task and invest in the people instead of doing another task. It's about telling the story of how we founded a company, of the mistakes that we've made, how we've learned. It's about growing together. It's about connecting even when it's hard to connect to others. We need storytelling in our life. We need it to connect, to learn, for psychological safety, to empathize with the struggles of others. so we can feel excited when other people succeed and overcome adversity. So, what if we started learning about each other before we ever gave each other a list of tasks to be completed? What if we started our conversations with a new person without mentioning our jobs or what we do for a living? What if we listen to customers and the stories of their struggles and we choose empathy? What if we connect to a time that we have struggled and then better understand what they're going through as well? So I have a challenge to everyone here today. Make one connection. Share a story with someone you don't know, or maybe you only know a little bit, and then take the time to listen to their stories too. Thank you all for being here for our lightning talks today. Thank you for listening to my talk on storytelling. We appreciate you all and everything that you have. Oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. Sorry. We appreciate you all and all of the things that you've, all the comments that you've given us today and all of the support that you've given our speakers. Feel free to give us more feedback at hello@virtualcoffee.io, and we will see you during our next round of lightning talks. Thanks.